Oh, yeah, like the dude just said. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to the middle of the week, y'all. The middle of the week. That's what is often referred to as hump day, which means we got to hear from the camel. Play it.
Uh-oh. Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Mike. What day is it, Mike? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's hump day.
Woo-hoo! Yes, it is. Middle of the week. You're halfway to the weekend. We're going to get you all the way to go home time on a Friday afternoon, so stand by for more. In the meantime, though, pushing the button so ably on the board, JP, hey, man, how are you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good enough. How about that?
Better than we deserve.
That's right. Too blessed to whine.
Yep.
All right. Hey, we got a great show laid on for you. Got several guests. So coming up here at the beginning of hour number 2, Ryan Cantrell. He's been with us many times. Ryan Cantrell is the vice president of American Federation for Children. He's going to be with us to discuss teachers unions, which, you know what? I'm just going there today, man. I am going there. So, yeah, we're going to talk about teachers unions. Ryan has been in the mix, in the fight for many years on the same issues for school choice and parents' rights and education. And we'll talk to him about teachers unions coming up at the beginning of hour 2. And then, you know the deal. You hear the camel at the beginning of the show on a Wednesday. That means coming up at the beginning of the third hour, we switch to the Grand Council. The Grand Council with 2 of my brethren, Jeff Poore and Dale Jackson, both checking in. We ping each other with questions and to see where the chips may fall. But that's at the beginning of hour number 3. And then there's still a triple dipper. So hit it, man.
The Triple Dipper. 3 stories you've got to know.
That's right. The Triple Dipper, 3 stories, 3 themes, if you will, that you got to know as we run today's show. First out the gate, I'm just calling it teachers union. That's all it is. I'm just going to talk about the teachers unions. Just going to talk about them. You know, anecdotally, factually, in the news, what they really are, expose, let's talk about it. Teachers unions, in my opinion, they are the worst thing that ever could have happened to the world of education. We'll talk about it. I got some personal experiences. Teachers union, number 1, triple dipper. Number 2, China's farm grab. Are y'all tracking this? China's farm grab. Like, what the heck, man? What is China doing coming over here buying up thousands and thousands of farmland acres in the United States? Well, multiple states and the federal government are actually pushing back on the issue because China doesn't have our best interests at heart. So why are we giving them our valuable farmland? That's number 2 on the triple dipper, China's farm grab. And then number 3, didn't get to it yesterday, assuming I can today, we're going to jump on it, but recouping the green new steel. It's amazing to watch as the market begins to regulate itself or rectify itself, if you will, and just put things back in the proper order. It's a rebalancing of the market. It's also, by the way, being done in a way that makes more sense because all of the government subsidies that propped up the fake green new steel market are being pulled away. We'll talk about that. Number 3 on the triple dipper, recouping the green new steel. Well, all right, let me jump on into today's Rightside Way opening monologue. Got a great story for you. You're going to love this. But I'll remind you guys, first of all, that attorney Stan McDonald is indeed the sponsor daily of the Rightside Way monologue. He's a 30-year veteran in the practice of law in North Alabama. And yep, he's your daily Rightside Way sponsor. And I'll tell you more about Stan here in just a minute. All right, I don't know if you've ever had one of those notions that you just needed to do something, but yet knowing full well that it really didn't make much sense. Then again, who am I talking to? Y'all are some of the folks out there who step out on faith all of the time. But this morning, I was reminded of a story that I'd totally forgotten about, a story that dates back just over 37 years to the year 1987. It's the craziest story of someone doing something they felt led to do that anybody may have ever heard of. Now, let me lead off by saying this. There's a lot of new information coming into the public sphere about the war between Russia and Ukraine. Just yesterday, President Trump announced that his great frustration with President Putin is causing him to rethink giving more aid to Ukraine. I think it'll be done entirely differently. He's talking about weapon systems. He's talking about calibrated. He's talking about having a plan. But nonetheless, he's retooling the potential for the United States to provide aid and assistance to Ukraine. Well, in the wake of Putin's disingenuous teasings about peace talks and then continuing to bomb Ukrainian civilians, including hospitals, Trump announced the U.S., is considering the resumption of arms assistance to Ukraine. Just today, after that announcement came out, the Pentagon began lobbing missiles and drones again into Ukraine. I'm not sorry, the Pentagon, but Putin. A Pentagon spokesman told Newsweek magazine that the Department of Defense is, quote, sending additional defensive weapons to Ukraine to ensure that Ukrainians can defend themselves while we work to secure a lasting peace. Okay. So there's a mixed bag of reporting right now. Some liberals are claiming that Trump is too soft on Putin. Some on the right are claiming we need to stay out of it. Europe and NATO continue to be on edge as a full-scale war engulfs parts of Western Europe or Eastern Europe. But what is interesting, though, in all of this is that Russia continues to just kind of ponderously slog its way along. I say that because think back just a few years ago. Remember when the war was about to kick off? And all the world talked about the great Russian bear was going to march into Ukraine's capital city of Kiev within like 4 days. And here we are several years later with a stalled front line on the eastern rim of Ukraine that's pretty much in trench warfare like World War I. One thing is sure. While Russia is big and Russia is nuclear and Russia is aggressive, Russia has always turned out to be a little more hollow than expected. It's true. You can look at history. When Russia agreed to the SALT treaties, the West was shocked to find out that many of their missile silos were already in disrepair and rusting. Reports are available online right now that will show you huge floating graveyards of the once vaunted Russian Navy. Popular Mechanics did a story in 2021 about 14 unwanted nuclear subs that the Russians just dumped into the icy waters of the Kara Sea, still filled with nuclear material in their reactors. I've heard of former Soviet pilots who defected with their MiG fighter jets only for the West to get hold of them and realize they were actually rather ill-equipped and made with cheap materials. But then there's a story from 1987. A story about the time that a 19-year-old kid actually beat the Soviet air defense systems during the height of the Cold War. What? Yes. A kid who wanted to see the Cold War come to an end, so he flew a private plane over 500 miles and landed it in Red Square right in front of the Kremlin. You heard me. So here's the story. In 1987, Reagan and Gorbachev were in a series of summits, meaning to negotiate arms controls and really to negotiate a new era that might be a move past the long-standing Cold War sentiments. Gorbachev was the most open leader the Soviet Union had had in its history. His policies, referred to as glasnost and perestroika, they were designed to create a new Soviet Union, one that was more open and transparent to some degree, more capable of international agreement, if you will. Unlike his predecessors, Gorbachev didn't bang his shoe on the podium and make claims that he was going to annihilate the West or try to put nuclear missiles in Cuba. But it was still the Soviet Union, though. And Gorbachev, he had a bunch of hardliners in his own government and military that he had to contend with. And to be honest, Gorbachev himself was a communist. Gorbachev was rooted to the idea of agreements that would downgrade the new U.S. nuclear deterrent in Star Wars, which was our efforts to put arms in space. And Reagan wanted an expanded talk about human rights and the Soviet Union's interventions in Afghanistan and more. Well, they never really got there. But the whole world could tell that the end of the Cold War was maybe a little closer than it had ever been. Everybody, including a 19-year-old German kid named Matthias Rust. Yep, Matthias Rust. JP just put his picture up on the screen. You can see it. But Matthias Rust was interested in politics, 19 years old. He had watched the news with his parents in Hamburg, Germany, as the Reykjavik summit ended in a stalemate. And at 19, he already had his pilot's license. And he said that he wondered if he could, in his words, create an imaginary bridge between West and East to show that a lot of people in Europe really wanted to improve their relations in the world. Okay. Sounds a little lofty for a skinny teenager with glasses to think he could change the world. But he did have access to a plane. Yeah. So 37 years ago, Matthias Rust of Germany told his parents he was going to take the plane up for a tour of Northern Europe. Now, I don't know what world his parents were living in, but I think I would have asked a few more questions. But anyway, Matthias Rust, 19 years old, set out. He made stops in the Shetland Islands, the Faroe Islands, Iceland, and then he went on to Helsinki, Finland. And at that point, he decided just to go for it. And after several days in Finland, he took off on a degree heading of 170 degrees from Moscow. Look, if you think this sounds crazy, you're right, but it gets better. When Rust turned off his transponder, the flight controls in Finland thought that he had crashed somewhere and a massive search began. Meanwhile, Matthias Rust, he crossed over the Iron Curtain into the Soviet airspace. At that time, it was believed the Soviets had the world's largest, most prolific air defense systems in the world. No one could get in. It was the Iron Curtain, remember? But he kept right on flying. At one point, history says that a Soviet MiG fighter flew up on an intercept pattern, looked at him, and then just flew away. Apparently, they assumed that nothing bad can really happen if the young pilot of a single-engine Cessna is just waving at you in friendly fashion. Well, he flew on for over 500 miles through Soviet territory. He said later he had assumed his chances of survival were like no better than 50-50. But then suddenly, he was in Moscow, coming in over Red Square, flying literally only 30 feet off the ground. Y'all, Red Square is to Russia what the White House and the National Mall and the Capitol building are to the U.S. It's an absolute no-fly zone. I recall hearing that at one point during the Soviet era, it was also against the law to even run in Red Square. You could only walk. As Matthias Rust flew over at eyeball level, the crowds were looking up in amazement. He circled low over a space that's heavily guarded and controlled, but his only worry was how he was going to land because the crowd was beginning to fill up with onlookers. He spotted a bridge right next to the famous St. Basil's Cathedral, and he put his plane down in a perfect landing. 19-year-old kid from Hamburg had just bypassed the military defenses of one of the world's great superpowers, came out of his plane and started shaking hands, telling everybody that he was there on a peace mission. And yes, he was arrested. And yes, he spent a lot of time being interrogated about his purposes and who were his co-conspirators and why was he trying to spy. But the Soviets finally came to understand this skinny kid from Western Europe was really not a hardened spy. He was not a big-time government defector. He just wanted to tell folks that the West was not evil and that he wanted peace. Matthias Rust, he was held in a Soviet prison for over a year. But in the interim, though, something else happened. You see, Gorbachev used the opportunity to fire a number of the hardliners who had allowed a private plane to fly past all manner of military security right into the seat of government. The Soviet Union was embarrassed on the world stage, and Gorbachev just began firing people left and right. Some say that the actions that Gorbachev took to rid himself of all the naysayers would not have happened if Matthias Rust had not landed in Red Square. 7 months later, Gorbachev traveled to America for what became known as the Washington Summit, and he signed the Nuclear Forces Treaty with Ronald Reagan in December of 1987. In 1988, Matthias Rust was released in a sign of good faith by the Soviets. 3 years later, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the Cold War era finally came to an end. Matthias Rust was quoted in a BBC article in 2012 saying that with regards to Gorbachev, he said, "I am, quote, very convinced that I enabled him to push through his perestroika and glasnost much faster than he would have done without me." Maybe so. I'm sure there were dignitaries and diplomats and soldiers who all believed they played a part in the pivotal roles of defending and ending the Cold War, but history dictates that it may have also had something to do with one skinny kid from Germany who decided to step out and make himself known. Matthias Rust, May 1987, the kid who may have brought down the Soviet Union. Y'all, that's one crazy story, but it's also true. But it also goes to my earlier point. Russia is certainly not to be underestimated. I'm not saying that. But they're also known to constantly be far less than what they pretend they are. It's how they've always been. It's how communist tyranny works. And Russian leaders have never operated in good faith. They will claim one thing and do another. And Trump is right to push for peace. We need it. But he's also right to announce he's not going to abandon Ukraine at this point. Trump recognizes that Russia is actually on the ropes. Putin needs victory in order to hold on to his power. He gambled that the world would fear Russia's image. But once he committed, well, it became apparent that there was a little less there than he had been portraying that he had. My hope is that Trump can work a peace deal soon. But history dictates you have to look behind the curtain, even the Iron Curtain, to see the real Russia. And that's a wrap for the Rightside Way. Crazy story. Matthias Rust, 19 years old, flies 500 miles through Soviet airspace, bypassing every security measure and air defense system known to man, and lands in Red freaking Square. How crazy is that? May have brought down the Soviet Union. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I just want to get to know you.
Sure.
So first of all, there's what I would call the more sedate side of your professional life.
Yes.
You're a mortgage broker.
Well, banker, but same thing.
Banker.
Yeah,
I apologize.
Mortgage banker. Yeah.
So How's that going, and how do you balance all of it?
A great support team. You know, I've started doing it August 27th, 2001. So just a couple of weeks before 9/11.
Oh, wow.
And I had just turned 20. I'll turn 44 later this year, and that's all I've ever done. So I've done mortgages longer than I was alive without mortgages, even through grade school. So it's kind of all I've ever known. But I started advertising a lot in the Huntsville market on radio and television in 2009. And I expanded to Nashville in 2010 and 11 and Chattanooga after that. And then somehow, some way became an accidental podcaster in 2015 with Ric Flair. And in 2016, he introduced me to his daughter. And in 2018, we got married. And yeah, it's a pretty crazy story how it all sort of dovetailed together.
I mean, I thought that my life was eclectic, but then I reviewed some of yours as I got ready for today, and I thought, no, I got nothing.
Well, it has been an interesting life, but what's interesting to me is that you and I are 1 degree separated, that my best friend in life, the guy who actually performed the ceremony between me and my wife, was a guy who I think you were kind of like his youth pastor of sorts.
I was, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How fun is that? Cassio Kid, shout out.
Cassio Kids, shout out. We love you still.
Yes, absolutely.
And what's kind of cool is I made the joke earlier that tell him I've still got pictures, but then again, he may come back and say, tell him I got more.
I love that. I love that. Pictures when he had hair.
That's
it wouldn't
exactly
even look
right.
like him. He's got plausible deniability. That guy's got hair. That's not me.
Hey, listen, so on the mortgage broker side of you still do that though, right?
Oh yeah, every day. Yes, sir.
I said broker, it's banker.
But no difference. I help families get into mortgages. I help people realize the dream of home ownership and then understand that they can reorganize their debt. Like right now, there's a lot of families who are struggling because, as you've probably heard, credit card debt is at an all-time high. Yeah. At the end of January, a report came out that said that America had $1.21 trillion in credit card debt. It's never been that high.
No.
And if you take a look from the pandemic to now, it's almost like a hockey stick. It's just through the roof. And I think the reason that is because people are hesitant to refinance out of their low-rate mortgages they locked down during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So they'll say things to me, Phil, like, well, you know, I'm rate sensitive, so I'm not going to refinance at a greater rate. But I almost challenge that, Phil, respectfully to say, how rate sensitive are you really if you've maxed out a credit card at 31%?
Yeah.
Like once you owe it, it's up to you to figure out how to pay it back. And not only is the interest rate you have on a credit card astronomically high, but the interest you pay on a credit card is not tax deductible, whereas the interest you pay on a mortgage is. So if you could get a cheaper payment and a greater tax deduction, improve your credit score, give yourself more room on that credit card in case something disastrous happens, and lower your monthly payments in the process, how do you lose? But a lot of families just don't really understand that, and they're just taught to think, well, I got a great rate on the mortgage, I need to leave that alone. But it's impeding their ability to take their kids to the movies or go get ice cream or just life.
So you've actually done this for a bit. I can tell by the way you verbalize it. It
Sure.
comes right on out. And I guess, too, let me ask you this, because I'm going to chase a rabbit for a second. We all watched the economy over the last 4 years, just the cycles of just craziness, 40-year high inflation, COVID pandemic set the rates low, trying to get the economy back, stimulation money being thrown in. Just it was madness.
Yes.
It was cats and dogs living together. It was all of it. Are you seeing people returning to the table, though? I mean, that conversation you said you can have with people on a regular basis. I do a lot of real estate law.
Mm-hmm.
You do the other side of it. You're the
Yes.
lender side. Are you seeing people coming back to the table, so to speak?
A little bit. I mean, the people who are in a bad place or life has dictated that they need to make a move.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, maybe there's a divorce or a loved one passes away or there's an empty nester or someone retires or they lose their job. Those are the type of people who are making moves right now. But people are still buying houses. People are starting a new career and they're excited to have a fresh new start in a new town or a new market. And their life has dictated that they have to buy something else. But I look at here locally, you think about Huntsville, Alabama, there's over 500 jobs that have been announced, and there's rumors it's more, that will be coming from the FBI down to Huntsville. I mean, Kash Patel was just there last week saying we hope to bring a lot more than just those 500 jobs. Well, that means there's 500 families, moms and dads, usually a two-family income or two-income household. They've now got to relocate their whole life to Huntsville, Alabama. Now, you and I know Huntsville's awesome, but this wasn't anybody in D.C.'s original plan. No. Like they have jobs, like probably only one of those people work for the FBI, but the other person has a job there.
They're also going to find out they can buy a lot more house here than they can in D.C.
Absolutely.
But some of them never owned a house, and now they'll be able to.
But are people going to rush to buy their existing house in D.C.? See, that's the problem
Yeah,
is
that's a good
they've
point.
got to sell a house there at the same time everybody else is leaving DC.
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Just making common sense like a superpower. Hey, can anybody explain to me what in the world Gavin Newsom is doing in South Carolina right now? I just looked up at the screen and there he is. He's like campaigning against Trump in South Carolina. I guess he's running for president.
I was going to
already.
say he's not even hiding the fact he's running for president
This
anymore.
is
But if I'm a
so-
constituent of California, I'd be pretty pissed to see my governor in another state for whatever reason.
You know, if there was a casting call for a movie about the Antichrist,
Yeah, he fits the model.
that's just what I look. That's in my mind. That's what it is. Holy cow! Which, you know, maybe some would find that to be defamatory conduct. If so, I apologize. It was not my intent to defame his character by alleging that he's the Antichrist. I'm just saying he
We're
looks
not
sleazy.
alleging. We're saying that he checks some boxes, maybe just simply by how he looks.
Just yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's the hair.
Yeah.
Text lines are open 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Text it. Come on, tell me what you're thinking. And I got to tell you, first of all, about attorney Stan McDonald. So yes, indeedy. Attorney Stan McDonald, daily sponsor of the Rightside Way monologue, partner at the law firm of Wilmer and Lee in Huntsville, a 30-year veteran in the practice of law in North Alabama. Listen, I know Stan personally. I can tell you right now, yeah, he's a good lawyer, but he's also the kind of guy who's been in the trenches, in the mix, in the fray for years as a conservative warrior on the things that right-side ruffians care about. But yeah, attorney Stan McDonald, though, as a lawyer, he's represented his clients in literally thousands of real estate transactions over the years. He can stand up for you in any local, state, or federal court. I like to say when Stan McDonald's on your side, you're going to have no greater friend. Likewise, your adversaries will have no greater foe. So yes, I'm going to tell you how to reach him. You ready? Stan McDonald, the law firm is Wilmer and Lee. The phone number is 256-479-3020. That's Stan McDonald, 256-479-3020. Tell him you heard about it on Rightside Radio. Okay, here we go. No representation made. The quality of legal service be informed of grade the quality of legal service. We're the lawyers. It's
Almost.
a little off. It's always the end.
Yeah.
It's always the end. It's like my tongue runs away with itself at that point.
It's like around a 9 flat still, though.
I'll take it. Text lines. What do we got? John from Huntsville checking in says, Phil, spectacular monologue. Also, did you hear that the measles have reached its highest number of cases in the United States since it was declared eradicated in the year 2000? By the way, JP, your Braves have officially become one of the biggest embarrassments in all of baseball for the year 2025.
Officially? I feel like they have been.
Okay. I'll let y'all duke that out. All right. Text it in 833-68-RIGHT. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We will be right back in a minute, but I think suffice to say, your previous resume has translated well into what you're doing in the civilian world.
It has, yeah. That you know, the time in the SEAL teams is what prepared me, but also gave me, it's like the little bit of bait on the hook. And you still have to set the hook, you know, but that's what gets people interested in who I am. Because SEAL, I'm just a regular dude like anybody else, but SEAL is a thing that people look at and they're like, wow, like, you know, you hear doctor, you know, you hear lawyer, you hear politician, you know, congressman, senator. Those things carry some weight because it takes something to get there, and I think that's what SEAL has done for me.
I think that's fair to say, and I think there's never going to be a time in your life, I'm of the mind, that God doesn't plant something in your life with purpose beyond what you might have imagined it.
100%, man. 100%.
You also, apparently, like every other SEAL, you wrote a book.
Yeah, that's right. Now, all my other SEAL buddies say, "I didn't write a book, bro. You wrote a pamphlet." You know, it's only like 50 pages long, but yeah,
It works. It publishes.
Yeah, that's right.
And you also, by the way, right here with Rightside, you're one of our podcasters.
Yeah,
you got the Liberty Minute podcast, comes out every other week for the most part. Yeah.
I told a guy told me, he said, "Oh man, you're that guy on the Liberty Minute with Phil Williams." I said, "Yeah, man. My name's Jared. Nice to meet you." I know exactly who you are. I got one question though. Why do you call it the Liberty Minute? Because it's like 13 to 17 minutes every time. And I said, look, it's just a name, bro.
It's a euphemism,
yeah,
man.
It's just a name. So I thought it was pretty good, though.
All right, cool resume. Let me ask you this. You got a beautiful family, amazing military record. You live large. How? And I'm going to start off, I'm going to get philosophical right off the bat. So having said all that, those things, like on paper, I see it all. But how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah, no, I mean, the only thing that you should be remembered as is who are you in the person of Jesus Christ, because that's the only thing that lasts, right? Now, if I die right now, I'm going to be attached. I'm going to have a lasting impact, even in my death, on my wife and my girls. Possibly some of the people in my sphere of influence, possibly some of the guys in the SEAL teams I work with or in business or whatever. I might have a lasting impact. But oftentimes that lasting impact is not so much – it's not so much who you are here physically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I really believe it's who you are in the person of Jesus Christ, because they look at it and say, man, that guy really was who he believed in. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So it's and I believe it's in James. He talks about, I'll show you my faith through my works. That's not a works-based salvation.
Right.
He's not saying that I'm working my way to heaven. I'm not doing X, Y, and Z, and that's going to get me to heaven. No, he's just saying, I have faith and I believe in Jesus, and because of that, you're going to see my fruits. My fruits are going to show that I believe in Jesus. Now, there's another aspect of that without getting too far off on this, topic. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I let people see who Jesus is through how I live my life." Right? That's what I don't necessarily tell everybody about Jesus, but they get to see who Jesus is through how I live my life. Well, that's not good either, because Paul says, how will they hear if they don't have a preacher to preach? So there's two aspects to that. There's one, what I say, right? Scripture says a freshwater spring doesn't produce salt water. What I say is unbelievably important. But then once I say it, it's my actions that back it up. It's words, then action. And we see that with God. John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, right? Wasn't in the beginning was the action, was the creation. No, in the beginning was the Word was God, the Word was with God. And then all was made through him and by him, and without him, nothing was made. We see that in John chapter 1. First was the Word, what he spoke, what we speak. Then second is the actions that back up what we speak. And ultimately see in John chapter 4 or John chapter 1, verse 14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among men, right? And we see that in Isaiah. He says, I was amazed. God was amazed that there was none who could stand before him. He's talking about when he was drawing the plan to create the world. None could intercede for man, so he said, I'll take up my own strong arm of salvation. So God says, I'm going to make a world where sin is possible. I'm not going to make them sin, but I'm going to give them the option. And guess what? I know they're going to choose sin. And there's none that are going to be able to stand before him, but I'm going to make a way out of sin.
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Just covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all, I'm talking about this show. This one, goes from like Huntsville back over to Chattanooga. I'm talking about Tuscaloosa back over to Gadsden. All the way down to that lovely little village on the plains we call Auburn, straight across the border, what we also now call Fort Benning. And then big old patches of North Georgia and Mississippi all thrown in just for good measure. And that's just the radio footprint. That's just all y'all out there in radio land. Thank you very much. And then there's all of y'all in the whole wide world going to the World Wide Web and streaming the show live every single day on places like X and Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and our website, rightsidemedia.org. So thank you very much. And then for those of y'all that podcasted after the fact, we love you too. And the bottom line is this. This audience is all over the place, and this audience picks us up in different ways, but the bottom line is we do it because of y'all. So thank you very much for being a part of the fabric of our lives. All right, going back to the text lines. Text me, 833-68-RIGHT. That's 833-687-4448. Mark from Decatur says, Gavin Newsom does look like 666. Good observation. Whew. Anyway, Jeffro from Indiana says, well, Phil, headed home from the hospital. There you go. Says, like we have so many times when the show was on. Hopefully this will be the last one, and she's doing really well. I am glad you tell Miss Caroline we said hello and that we were praying, and that even Charlene asked to make sure that I found out. And so thank you very much. I tell you what I also want to know. And JP, you might want to look him up. I see him right down the string there. Shane from Lacey Springs. I think he's the one. Was he the one that texted in about little Ivy who had the heart transplant? If that's him, would you text him, ask him for an update? I'd love to be able to tell the audience.
We
Well,
actually,
you just texted in.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Wow. Okay. Shane from Lacey Springs just texted in and says Ivy is doing great today. She was extubated. Wow, they've already extubated her. And she is on BiPAP now. God is good. Thanks for the prayers, everyone. God bless. Well, Lord, bless her recovery too in the name of Jesus. That's good. For those of y'all that missed it yesterday, Shane from Lacey Springs let us know that his little 9-month-old granddaughter was having a heart transplant. And that is so amazing. First of all, what an amazing thing that God has gifted the world of medical science with that ability. But 9 months old, having a heart transplant, and apparently she's doing great. So Shane, keep us posted. Thank you for letting us know. Allie from Athens says, this monologue was awesome, all caps. Said, I will take the skinny kid from Hamburg all day long, Colonel. May we clone him, sir? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a little impetuous. I don't know that people need to be, flying across borders and storming into no-fly zones of nation capitals. But nonetheless, it's still a crazy cool story. Yeah, Matthias Rust. What? All right. So JP, let me ask you, when you were 19, if you told your parents, hey, I'm going to take the plane, I'll be gone for a while, fly around Europe a bit, how would that have gone over?
Well, first they would have been like, you don't know how to fly a plane, which would have been true.
Okay,
but if I did, then yeah, no, then certainly not. But I probably wouldn't have told them if I was planning on doing that in the first place.
I look at it, there's most kids that you couldn't even say, can I have the car go drive around?
Yeah, it's also, but nowadays where my family has Life 360, they would just look and see that I'm like flying across the ocean and be like, what are you doing?
Yeah. There's probably what do you call those little things? Those little Apple, the locator things. What do they call those little pods or whatever?
Air tags.
Yeah, little air tags in the heel of your shoe or something. You don't even know it.
But also, America's a lot further away from Russia than Germany is, so he had a little bit of a shorter flight.
He did. Anyway, what a weird, wacky story, but yes, it is indeed. But,
by the way, we got a couple of comments. We got Turgle on the Rumble saying Lawyer Phil is back again. So
Lawyer Phil is indeed back again.
2 days in a row.
I am. I'm overdressed for radio, but dressed just fine for Lawyer Phil. Thank you very much.
And then David from Bucky's on the YouTube says, talking about the monologue, said, I remember that incident. I was in Germany. We were all on edge for a while, wondering what the Soviets' response might be.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't even remember it, but 1987 is the year I got my commission. So let's see, that was in May of 87. So yeah, I was actually about to get my commission within about a month of that as an Army officer. So I was brand spanking new, a butter bar coming up pretty soon, but I did not recall the story at all. And it just kind of flashed back into the forefront here recently.
By the way, one more, John is saying he doesn't think Gavin Newsom is the Antichrist because there's other people who check a lot more boxes than he does.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I don't want names. Just leave it like that. All right. Hey, listen, we're gonna dive right into Dipper number 1. And coming up here in about 20 minutes or so, I've got somebody calling in who is no stranger to the wrath and the angst and the nefarious doings of the teachers unions. Y'all, I cannot for the life of me think of anything that a teachers union has done to improve the quality of education anywhere. If you can, tell me. And by the way, that's not saying they didn't get a raise for their membership, or they didn't get extra time off for their membership, or they didn't, promote DEI policies for their membership. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, did education statistic numbers go up because teachers were unionized by uber liberal organizations? The teachers union, and I really, so I will tell you right now, I dealt with them firsthand. The teachers union hated me when I was in office. Hated me. And I don't mean like a little bit. I mean, like they did all they could to try and make my life miserable. The teachers union put everything they had monetarily into making sure I didn't get elected, and I beat them anyway. In my second go-round, in my second election, I ran against a longtime Democrat who was upfunded by the teachers union an incredible amount. My race, if I recall, became the I think, the third most expensive legislative race in the state house that year. I think the pro tem and the Speaker of the House were the two most expensive, and then me. And me personally, I think I raised $770,000 and had to keep, running ads and doing all the things it takes. The teachers union gave another $500,000 or more to my opponent. It was ridiculous, and they are as spiteful and as dilatory and as recalcitrant as anything you've ever seen. And I don't mean like a little bit. I'll go ahead and step out on a limb and use a word that I use very sparingly. All right. And when I say this, I say it with all sincerity. The teachers union in Alabama has what I consider to be an evil history. They are an evil organization. Again, I am not saying that. That's not rhetoric. That's not me just using hyperbole. That's me saying that in my experience, and by the way, just like in scripture, I'm only telling you what I've seen and heard, right? That's Acts chapter 4, verse 13, I believe it is. I'm just speaking what I've seen and heard. Well, in speaking what I've seen and heard, the AEA is an evil organization. You can take issue with that if you want to. I could care less. That's the way I feel about it. I watched them oppose every good measure. I watched them get way outside their lane and fight for liberal things in the midst of conservative issues that had nothing to do with education. I watched as the head of the teachers union sat in the gallery of the House in his personal chair, because that was his spot and you didn't take his spot. And he would give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and the legislature would vote the way his thumb went, because he was the head of the teachers union. And he was called the other governor of the state of Alabama. It's ridiculous. And then I watched as they slimed people and tried to malign people and tried to destroy people. I'm telling you, they had more clout in Montgomery than any organization should ever be allowed to have in any state capital. You talk about special interests, they weren't special. They were just awful. They were awful interests. And they had nothing good to do except retain their power and fight for Democrat liberal issues. So that being said, when we got involved in when we took back the state house in Montgomery in the year 2010, the first time the Democrats had been out of power for 136 straight years in our state house. When we took it back, I sat down and I made out a plan. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it was my plan that did it, but I sat down, I thought, what are all the things we have to do to emasculate the teachers union, to neuter their ability to then, make further trouble for us? And I'll never forget, I went and I met with Senator Del Marsh, who was the pro tem of the state Senate. And we had lunch one day over in Anniston, went to a barbecue place. I can still picture it. We're sitting there at Dad's barbecue. And I said, I got something, man, I want to talk to you about. And he was okay. And I said, I'm a thinker. I'm a strategist. This is what I do. In my head, I kind of plan things out. I've got about a 15-point plan that if we can do these 15 things, the teachers union will never be able to fight back again. Wow, what do you got, Phil? I went down the list with him. Y'all, we did every one of them. What bothers me now, and by the way, I'm not saying that we went in there and he walked in and says, hey, everybody, we're using Phil's plan. It didn't go quite like that. But what I'm saying is, he goes, well, we're already doing this, and you're right on this one. And hey, I like that one too. And we just basically checked all those blocks. What I am saying, though, is I'm super frustrated at watching right now, and they deserve to be called out. I'm watching right now as Republicans in the Alabama State House are taking money for their campaigns from the AEA again. There was a time when you were considered to be a pariah, or it was antithetical to being a Republican if you did that, or you were one of those old schools who was really a D with an R by your name. But now it's like, oh, I'm a conservative, but I still took 30,000. I still took 40,000. I still took 55,000 from the teachers union. Stop it. The Alabama Republican Party has a standing policy that they want their legislators to not take money from the teachers union. And yet they are, too many of them. You know why? Because they were not there for the fight. They were not there for the fight, and they've lost the view. They have totally, I'll just be honest with you. There's some people that I love in that state house still. And there's some who I think need to go. But by and large, most of the state house Republicans right now are squishy soft, not because they're not conservatives, not because they're not willing to do something, because they've never had the fights that we had. And when you don't have the battle scars and all you can do is talk about the battles that could be, you're not near as battle hardened at that point. And we're looking at a bunch of Republicans that are so non-battle hardened, who don't bear the scars of the old fights, that they are willing now to take money for what used to be the enemy, and an enemy who, by the way, is still the enemy. I'm going to tell you more about it after the break. That's my diatribe. That's my rant. But y'all, I got facts, figures, and funny stories. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, teachers unions, they suck. We'll be right back. A moment ago, so you grew up in a time of war.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us where you're from and how that came about.
Yeah, I was 8 years old when the war ended. Came from in Vietnam. I came from the Mekong Delta of Vietnam. We lived right by the Mekong River. Mekong River is pretty big river. I think it's even bigger than the Mississippi River here. But we live right on the border between Cambodia and Vietnam. It's about 6 miles from my house. The border is, and I was 8 years old when the war ended. And because I live on the border of Cambodia and Vietnam, I also experienced the war between Cambodia and Vietnam after the fall of Saigon in 1975.
Yeah, that was a turbulent time. I mean, you're talking about the time of not just the United States presence in Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and what the fall of Saigon was 1975. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think the U.S. troop pulled out in 1973.
Yeah. And then Saigon fell in 75. Is that right?
Right.
The communist takeover of the country at that point.
Exactly.
But then the Khmer Rouge were north in Cambodia, and the killing fields started in like 78, 79 time frame.
Yes. About, 76 when it kind of started, and then it just escalated between 78 and 79.
Now, you lived in the Mekong Delta area, so were you in an urban environment, or were you in like a rural environment?
I was in an urban environment. It's a little town called Tăng Châu, Tanchau, and is in the An Giang province. It's, the roads in Vietnam is really not smooth like here. So it takes about 6 hours from Saigon. So it's a little bit southwest of Saigon.
Listen, I've had some time overseas myself in different parts of the world. And I've said many times, people don't realize here in America that the dirtiest alleyway is sometimes better than the best road in foreign countries.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you remember war when you were a kid?
Gosh, yes. I remember a lot. And, when the thought of putting my story together and putting it in a book, I realized that I had forgotten a lot. And once I enlisted Lisa Smith to help me with the book, she asked some questions, and it just kind of, helped me to go back to the past. So I remember mostly where I am. The Vietnam War didn't affect me as much, but the war between Cambodia and Vietnam affected me a whole lot more, because being near the border town, living by the Mekong River, we saw the atrocities of Pol Pot's, the killing fields, basically, coming down that river every single day.
I saw a speech you gave getting ready for today, and you talked about the fact that your mother would say, "Don't go to the river."
Yeah.
And you did anyway.
Yes.
Like most kids would do. Mom says, "Don't do it."
Exactly.
You did it, but what did you see? What happened when you went down there?
Well, my parents tried to shield us. We came from a very wealthy family, so my parents tried to shield us from a lot of things, and there are times where the atrocity of Pol Pot's body parts coming down that Mekong River. And I'm not talking about 1 or 2 bodies. I'm talking about a wave of hundreds and thousands of bodies.
And you saw this as a kid.
I went, my mom and dad was like, "Don't go to the river, don't look out to the river." And other kids, of course, me, and also dragging some of my siblings and cousins and go look at it. And I remember seeing bloated bodies headless, heads and hands and limbs, and just coming down, floating down the river, and watching some of my relatives taking long sticks and push the body parts back into the channel so that it would, keep on floating down that main channel. And I remember the smell of it. It's just horrific.
There are, I've sort of said sometimes that memories are sometimes keyed more by smell than they are by visual.
Yeah.
Smells come back to you. They bring things back.
Absolutely. Believe it or not, the blooms of the pear trees in spring bring that memories back.
Really?
There's a smell of it that it's remind me of the bodies that I smell as 8-9 years old. Wow. And I remember the other 2 weeks ago when I was given talk to a high school kid.
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Just saving the world one soundbite at a time. Dave from Capshaw says, I guess you saw the Fox News article titled Nation's Largest Teachers Union Votes to Sever Ties with Anti-Defamation League over their Israel support. The union will no longer use ADL-provided material regarding the Holocaust or anti-Semitism and will forego using or promoting any other ADL-affiliated matter. See, you can't make this crap up. The Anti-Defamation League has actually become very liberal. It's very liberal. But they're also originally founded to fight anti-Semitism. And because they dared to speak up in favor of Israel, the teachers union wants to sever ties. That's just crazy. Stephen from Athens says, yes, teachers unions are the worst. And anyway, there you go.
He's calling you a young man in the text before that.
He called me a young man?
Yeah.
Wow. I see it. I didn't realize that. He says, Phil, young man. Oh, wow. He says, Butter Bar in 1987. I was commissioned at Fort Benning in May of 79. Well, then you're an old man. How about that? He says, I too was in FRG in 87 as a senior captain. Remember well the Red Square event and the aftermath. By October of 88, I was promoted to a major of infantry, detailed to the IG Corps. Just messing with you about the young man thing. Well, I'm just messing with you about the old man thing. Anyway, appreciate you. Thanks for your service, Stephen. You had one on YouTube or Facebook or someplace. Where'd you have it?
Oh, yeah. We got somebody on Facebook saying, I did research showing 87 Republicans took $1.3 million in a year from the AEA in the 2022 election. Said he provided that to the GOP.
I have no doubt. And oh, by the way, 1819 wrote a big article on it, and I'll get to that in just a minute. So, I mean, it's almost hilarious when you look at it. So I got a piece here from Red State. Randy Weingarten, who is a chucklehead. Randy Weingarten is just like a cartoon of a person, but she's the head of the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. So there's the two biggest teachers unions are the AFT and the NEA, the National Education Association. Neither one of them have anything good to do for education. But Randy Weingarten, I don't know if you saw this or not, on the 4th of July, she had to repost her Happy 4th of July post about 3 or 4 times because she kept getting misspellings. And you're thinking, okay, you're the head of the teachers union, and it's to the point that it got embarrassing. Like the sun was peeking from behind the flag, but she had peeking spelled wrong. She had 4th of July. She spelled 4th wrong multiple times.
I saw that one. She spelled it like number 4 RTH.
Yes.
I'm like, are you that dumb?
Over and over again.
Second grade me knew that wasn't correct.
She, of course, they were digging around punctuation too, but it is Twitter, so I'll give her a pass on that one. But you look at it and go, okay, this is not even funny. Are you sure you were a teacher at some point? But listen, here's the kind of thing the teachers unions have been doing. I got a story here, another one off of Red State. This is a gross story, really. This one came out in April of this year. And it points out that, school is supposed to be a safe place. Students grow and learn there, and parents ought to be confident about their children's security in a school. Back in April of 22, it turns out that school staff in a school in Jefferson County, Colorado, assisted a minor student in fabricating a claim of being homeless. What? So that the child could leave the parents' home and then move in with the teacher who had been grooming that child for an inappropriate relationship. By the way, the teacher met the child as a member of the Gay Straight Alliance Club. Oh, wonderful. Nothing could go wrong there. You've got a club based on sexual orientation, and now the teacher wants to take the child home. Couldn't have a problem with that. The school counselor, multiple teachers, and the principal were all aware of the strange relationship between the teacher and the child, but did nothing to facilitate the correction. The parents found out. The parents confronted things. The parents were told, back off. Here's the thing. In an effort to try and rectify things, members of the legislature in Colorado decided to run a bill. Did they run a bill to make sure it never happened again? No, they ran a bill to make sure it could happen again. They ran a bill saying that parents cannot misgender or dead name their own child, that it would be child abuse and it could remove the child from the house. Not coincidentally, here's the point why I bring this up. The 4 sponsors of the bill that followed that heinous level of activity, that did nothing but make it worse, the 4 sponsors were all endorsed and funded by the local teachers union and the National Teachers Union. The same National Teachers Union, the NEA, which had promoted the idea of teachers reading the book Gender Queer during their summer break. The American Federation of Teachers actually donated to all 4 of those and then lobbied in support of the bill. So let me get this straight. The National Teachers Union funds the people who ran bills like that, and then the National Teachers Union came to the state to lobby to pass a bill that says that parents could lose their parental rights if they, quote unquote, dead named a child. What's the teachers union doing? Well, the teachers unions are constantly in opposition to parents having a right to raise their children. And then you got this, it goes way into politics. Randy Weingarten, who again is the head of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten was one of the organizers and promoters of the big No Kings Day we just had over the 4th of July holiday. The No Kings Day. What is the teachers union doing out sponsoring No Kings Day? She's out there bouncing around, flailing her arms everywhere, screaming like a lunatic. It was like I heard one person said that it was like an ad for homeschooling, like get your kids out of public schools. Why is the head of the National Teachers Union helping promote No Kings Day, which has nothing to do with education? It's literally an opportunity to scream against conservative values. Well, that's what she does. That's what she did. Coming up, we got more on this. Teachers unions, what do you think? Text it 833-687-4448. Ryan Cantrell from the American Federation for Children coming in next.
There's more inventory than ever before. Are they going to be upside down? Yes, their dollar goes further in Huntsville than it does DC, but if they've still got a mortgage hanging around up there, boy, it's a real challenge. So we've got to get some sort of relief with interest rates. I believe this firmly. As interest rates go, so does the economy.
Yeah.
You know, if we can get real estate moving again, our economy will fix itself. So much of what our economy in America is based on is our single biggest asset. And for most families, that's their house. And so they're not really putting that big asset into play. The economy isn't at full scale. So I think there's pent up. Think about if you had a crank and a water hose. That's what we've got right now.
Yeah.
You've got a ton of folks who want to buy another home. Their current home no longer suits their needs, but they're not going to let go of this great rate. And they know that home sales are slowing. I mean, there's more listings on the market. There's more inventory than there's been in a while. But by the time, we unkink that hose with low interest rates, we're going to be back in a 2020 situation where we have more buyers than we have inventory. Those prices will come back. So I do think now, if you're a savvy investor or if you're willing to see what's coming, interest rate relief will be there. You can still get great deals on homes right now. If you wait until the rates are better, you will have missed it. I mean, you remember how crazy that was? Multiple offers the same day. It was bananas.
We were doing 5, 6, 7 closings a week in my small firm, and it was in a market, by the way, where I'm at right now that is not Huntsville, Alabama,
right?
Which is not a depressed market by any stretch, but the refinance especially was going through the roof with the rates.
Yes.
All right, so let me ask you this: I can hear the passion in your voice. It's obvious you love what you do and you're a professional at what you do. Which one's more fun, this or the podcasting wrestling side of your life?
Well, listen, that's hard to answer.
Just me and you talking. Which one's more fun?
The figuring out how to structure a deal is fun. Laughing and cutting up with my buddies, telling inappropriate jokes to make people laugh about old wrestling stories, that is more fun.
Yeah.
But there's nothing more rewarding than feeling like you had a meaningful impact on someone's life.
Yep.
And I realized that we can do that with the mortgage business. I mean, I routinely help people experience, a $1,500 a month savings. I mean, that's like they had a second really nice part-time job, because that's like net dollars. So think about how much you would have to earn in order to bring home $1,500. Like, that allows families to do more for their kids, for their moms, for their dads, be more, active in their community. Just relief and peace of mind. That's what it's about.
So I guess in essence, I'm going to paraphrase slightly, but do you feel like you're helping people no matter which side of your professional life you're on?
I do. I mean, I whenever we do live events on the podcast side, I always do a meet and greet before. Me and my co-hosts would do a VIP meet and greet, and you'd be surprised how many people get emotional at the table when they say, "Hey, man, when my mom died, or my spouse died, or my son was diagnosed with leukemia, I needed an escape." And just listening to you guys talk about old wrestling brought me back to that place when I was a young person and watching wrestling with my grandfather or whatever. So just stirring up those feelings of nostalgia and giving people a fun distraction does have value.
Sure it does.
But I'm not interfacing with those folks on a one-to-one basis as often as I am the customers and families that we serve on the mortgage side.
Well, you mentioned old wrestling.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm an old guy. So I'm thinking back to the days of like Tojo Yamamoto
Yes.
and Gorgeous George.
Oh, yeah.
And Rowdy Roddy Piper.
The best.
And I mean, these were the guys of my day. I can still remember sitting in my granny and granddaddy's kitchen in Birmingham with the black and white TV on the roller stand over there in the corner of the kitchen, and looking at my granddaddy, say, "Granddaddy, that man just hit another man with a metal chair."
Yes.
And as a kid, just watch. In fact, one of the funniest ones to me was Tojo Yamamoto used to do a commercial for a bed company, and he would jump on the mattress as proof that the mattress could hold up his weight.
I love it.
And then they would come back and they would say, "And if you don't buy from so-and-so bedding town, Tojo wants to know," and he'd come on and go, "What's the matter, you?" And that was the whole commercial. But that whole culture was built around those old guys.
Yes.
But over time, it became far, far more than what we used to watch in the small arenas on the black and white TV.
Yes.
I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar sport now.
No doubt about it. It continues to get larger and larger too. I mean, WWE is experiencing their greatest success ever right now. And a lot of people are really impressed with that, considering it's happening sort of post Vince McMahon. He's sort of like the Walt Disney of the pro wrestling world. And now that he's out of the picture, I think a lot of people were keeping an eye on it, wondering, what does this look like without Vince McMahon? And we found out it's a hugely successful publicly traded business under the TKO banner. Nick Khan and Ari Emanuel and Mark Shapiro, they're printing money for WWE right now for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you're a mortgage broker guy.
Yep.
I keep calling it that.
That's all right.
You're a mortgage guy. Let's just do mortgage guy. You're a mortgage guy.
That's what I call myself on Twitter, Conrad the Mortgage Guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Conrad the mortgage guy meets Ric Flair.
Yep.
And then now you're married into the Flair family.
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
She was Ric Flair's daughter. Now she's Conrad Thompson's wife. There you go.
Play that for his kids.
No, I'm just saying, realistically, I'm not Conrad Flair, but she is Megan Thompson.
That's perfect.
Yeah, so
No,
she
that's
joined
good.
my family, and we're delighted to have her. But yeah, it's sort of a happy accident. I met Rick at an autograph event in Rome, Georgia, of all places, and that was in, I believe it was November of 2013. And sadly, he had lost his son Reed to an overdose in March of that year. So he was in a challenging headspace, but we quickly headed off, and he was looking for a friend. And respectfully, he was looking for a friend to go drinking with. And so I signed up to do it. And one of my friends said, "Hey, man, how many times are you going to drink beer and watch sports with Ric Flair?" And I said, "About as often as I can, I guess. That sounds like fun to me." So that's what we did. And so we just became drinking buddies. And one day, I think we were watching the NFL draft. He said, "Hey, what's a podcast? Can you make any money with a podcast?" And I said, "Well, I don't know if you can make money with a podcast, but show me your phone. I'll show you how it works." That was 2014.
So before podcasts were even cool. Really.
Yeah, well, I guess, yeah. CBS had reached out to him and offered him a podcast. So in 2015, he launched Woo Nation on Play.it, which was a CBS platform. And he would go into the radio station on Peachtree in downtown Atlanta and record his podcast. And he got nervous 2 days beforehand. He said, Conrad, it just feels weird, me just being alone in a room talking to a microphone.
I get that.
Will you come in to the studio and just let me, you ask me fan questions? And I said, sure. So I thought, man, I don't know how many people are going to hear this, but I don't want to embarrass myself. So I did a lot of production notes.
Dude just said solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to hour number 2. Hour number 2 on a hump day. We're going to get you all the way to go home time on a Friday afternoon, but you're halfway there. So listen, I got somebody that I've worked with over the years. I've enjoyed his company. I've enjoyed the work that he does. He's good at what he does. Ryan Cantrell and I first met when I was in Montgomery serving in the state Senate, and he was actually working at the time for our Senate Pro Tem, Del Marsh. He's got experience working with the Alabama Republican Party, but he is now, oh, by the way, the National Vice President of Government Affairs for the American Federation for Children, one of the best organizations out there for fighting for the rights of parents and school choice and making education a better environment for our kids. That being said, let me stop talking and bring him on. Ryan Cantrell, how are you doing? Uh-oh, did we lose him? Ryan Cantrell, can you hear me?
We'll try getting back on.
Oh, shoot. Okay, we'll get him back on, but right now we got, apparently the mute button is not letting him in. So you try to get, Ryan, you there?
Ryan Cantrell.
Hey, Ryan, can you hear me? Oh my gosh, this is wearing me out, JP. All right, JP, you work your magic on that end. I'll just keep talking to my end. While JP is working to get him back on the line, let me just go ahead and say the president of the largest national teachers union, the NEA, is a woman by the name of Becky Pringle, and she is an absolute knucklehead. I mean, and I've never seen her give a speech where she wasn't shouting. And she's one of those who, when you watch it, you think, I think she thinks she's a really good speaker, and she's really not. But Becky Pringle was recently out at having what's being referred to as an unhinged tirade, working to basically defend the idea of illegal immigrants being spared from ICE roundups. Why is that what the AEA, or the NEA is doing? Have you got Ryan back on? Ryan, are you on right now? I got nothing, JP. Okay.
I don't know.
Listen, he was there because we talked to him off the air. Go ahead and just reboot the phone system and see if we can get him back on. That's the second day in a row that's happened. But anyway, Becky Pringle from the NEA says, I'm so proud to join you here this afternoon on behalf of 3 million members of the NEA. I would bet that some of those 3 million members, many of whom are in this listening area, by the way, because if you're a member of the AEA, or in Tennessee, the TEA, if you're a member of that, you're considered an automatic member of the NEA. And this is what they're doing with your dues. Oh no, Phil, I don't support them with my dues. Yes, actually you do. Actually you do. If you are sending your dues to the AEA in Alabama or the TEA in Tennessee, you are an automatic member, and a portion of your dues are diverted to go to the national organization, the NEA. And the NEA president is out there screaming, quote, enough of ICE raids, enough of cruelty and hate, enough of division. Do we know what the administration is doing? We are saying to Donald Trump and all his allies, we will not scapegoat immigrants. We will not. Well, listen, the bottom line is that's what it's doing. So I'm going to hand my phone to JP. Call him on my phone right now and talk to him. All right. Let's see if we can get him back in the next break. All right. We'll try that. Here's the deal. The teachers union's got no place doing this. This is not their role. Allegedly, they were formed to advocate on behalf of educators, and I get that. But supposedly, they stand for things like excellence in education. Tell me how it is excellence in education if the head of the NEA is out there rabble-rousing and fighting against law enforcement, doing what it's doing to enforce the laws of our nation, against something that the people of this nation overwhelmingly voted for, by the way. Or the other one, the AFT with Randy Weingarten, out there helping form the No Kings protests against anything that conservatives stand for. How is that a part of the dues process, what you paid for with your dues? Because I would bet, and I know for a fact, listen, I used to have people in the AEA in Alabama who thought they just had to be in the AEA because I'm a teacher. Is that the way it works? No, we changed that law. You're allowed now to elect whether you want to be a member. You don't even have to be a member. And oh, by the way, here's one of the things we had to do. We used to have an issue with the AEA's dues being collected by the state on their behalf and the state mailing a check to the AEA. That's how bad it was. Now we make them collect it on their own. So if you don't want to be a member, you don't have to be. And if you're wondering why this is all happening, it's because the NEA is so upfunded by people, a lot of whom don't even realize what is happening with their dues on a regular basis. I got a piece here by a guy named Josh Nelson from Fox News, came out yesterday, actually this morning. Trump's big, beautiful bill will impact K-12 education. Well, it will. One of the things it does is provide an education scholarship tax deduction. Yes, it does. But it also does things to help overcome teachers' unions. And the teachers' unions are hating the Trump administration right now. Article says school choice policies typically face hurdles in blue states where teachers' unions have significant influence. Left-leaning teachers' unions usually reject school choice measures since they claim it debilitates public school funding and resources. Well, no Democratic-controlled state has ever passed school choice legislation. But the Trump administration has just signed into law an effort to promote school choice that has never been there like it is right now, ever, at the national level. The Trump administration is also looking to do away with the State Department, the Federal Department of Education. And the teachers' unions are basically watching their power base erode because those are entities they control. When I say they control them, Miguel Cardona, who was Joe Biden's Secretary of Education, came to us from the teachers' union. He got the job. Y'all, I'm just telling you, right now what you're watching is the fact that the teachers' unions have had an unmitigated amount of power, and they have done things with it that have nothing to do with education. But if you want any further evidence of what I'm saying about your dues, there's an article that I pulled off of AL.com. Phil, did you go to AL.com? I did. AL.com from 2011. Phil, yes. 14 years ago, this article was written about the work that we were doing when I was in the legislature to emasculate the AEA. And the first thing it says is, Alabama teachers do have a choice. The AEA used to tell its members or tell its teachers, you have to join. They used to shut the door and get you to sign your cards and agree for your dues to be removed from your pay. I'll never forget talking to a young teacher who, when she heard that there was a choice, she sat up and she said, excuse me, are you telling me that I have to join? And she was told, you need to sign right here. No, I've heard that we don't have to join. Oh, no. I've heard that we don't have to join, and it would save me $60 a month as a young teacher if I just chose not to. So I'm not going to. And when she did, in her new employee orientation, about 15 others looked around and went, you can do that? Really? Yeah, me too. I don't want to join. And they were ticked. By the way, that person's related to me, and it was a high point in my day. I'm going to take a break right now, see if we can get Ryan Cantrell back on the line. But let's take the break. Maybe we'll have more time with him when we get back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Walked in with notes for he and I had things bolded and highlighted and all that.
Yeah.
And the people there at CBS said, hey, who is this guy and why is he here? And Rick said, oh, he's just going to sit in this episode and ask me fan questions. But at the end, CBS said, can you come back next week? That was pretty good. So I became an accidental podcaster. It wasn't the plan. But about a month in, I realized, I've been spending like $100,000 a month on marketing in Nashville, Huntsville, and Chattanooga to promote my mortgage company. But people can hear this all over the world, and I'm not paying for it. I need to get licensed in more states than just Alabama and Tennessee. Yeah. And I need to start driving traffic that way. So I quickly did. We went from an ad budget of $100,000 a month. That was the real number for our mortgage company, to $0. And it's all just through podcasts. And we experienced phenomenal growth. We had a much bigger platform because of the podcast. So anytime I get a chance to come on a show like yours, I jump at the chance. I believe in the medium. And I know that, podcasting is a great way to grow small business. And I hope everyone listening to this embraces it.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I agree. And in fact, I would call myself somewhat accidental and late in life too. That point, I got a call out of nowhere. Would I do a radio show? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And next thing you know, here I am, radio, podcasting, and all of it. Yeah. And really watching something grow. And I'm like you, I'm a dual career guy. I've got a law firm, and yet I don't know which one I spend more time on, to be honest with you. In fact, I probably really do. Here I am sitting with you. But the truth of the matter is, it's a hoot, and you get to do what I call impacting culture.
Yes.
And that's where I feel like my calling is impacting culture, and having an opportunity to be a part of the mix and to express something that other people might go, oh, that's what I've been trying to figure out the words to say. And if I can get that done in a day, I feel like I've done my gig.
Absolutely.
All right. That being said, let me ask you, so the Accidental Podcaster, but it didn't just stop with the one. You had Woo Nation, you and Ric Flair.
That's right.
Which is not currently going now, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No, CBS closed Play.it. CBS Radio actually sold. So when they sunset that, Rick and I had already decided, hey, we can monetize this and sell this better on our end if we just take over sales and everything. At that point, we were, quote unquote, just talent. But I, as an entrepreneur and small business owner, I was like, I think there's more money to be made if we just control it all.
Yeah.
So I pitched him on, let's just launch our own show independently. And my buddy Dave Green, who I met because he ran the Cumulus Cluster in Huntsville, which features one of your fabulous shows on WVNN, he had moved back home to St. Louis. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, do you think you could represent me as our ad sales guy? And he said, absolutely. So we came up with, using my graphics girl, like a slate for him to pitch, and well, we could, pitch some sales, and it worked. So the success of the Ric Flair show, which we launched, and somehow it debuted at #1 on the sports charts, I said, hey, you know what? This is great, but I sure would like to get some more of those leads the other 4 days of the work week, because I had been used to advertising my mortgage company through the radio Monday through Friday with live ads, because I would call into the station and say what's going on and tell today's success story or what have you. So I thought I need to build more shows. So I had, through a different project, I was doing some recruiting in Nashville, and I wanted to shoot a campaign targeting guys who had worked in the auto finance industry. They understand sales, they understand interfacing with customers, and they understand finance. So I thought these guys are natural to do it in the mortgage business, but a much better quality of life. Anybody who's worked in the car business can tell you it's just a grueling grind of a schedule. So to be able to get back more of that time and perhaps earn more money, I thought, hey, this is a home run. So I reached out to a former WWE producer who had produced a bunch of their stuff through the years for guys like The Rock or Stone Cold or The Undertaker. And I said, help me come up with a compelling commercial. So we worked on it for the better part of a week. And near the end of one of our shooting days, we're just collapsing on my couch at the house like, whew, what a long day. And as we're just shooting the breeze, I said, hey, man, what happened when? And I asked a very specific wrestling question. And he adjusted in his seat, and we talked about it, and he told me the story. His name is Bruce Pritchard.
Okay.
And at the time, he had worked at a Volvo dealership, and then after that, he had worked managing a law firm for a great close personal friend of his named Rob Taylor in Houston, who was really an icon in the mesothelioma and asbestos and all that sort of stuff back in the day. Anyway, I'm saying all that to say he thought he was completely done with wrestling, and wrestling was done with him. But what I heard that day, I was convinced at the end of that conversation. I said, Bruce, we should do a podcast.
You heard the institutional knowledge.
And he said, who wants to hear me talk? And I go, dude, every wrestling fan would be riveted by what you just said. The only trouble is we didn't record it. But if we would have recorded that and posted it, it would be the most viral wrestling podcast there is. Well, eventually I convince him to, let's just record a few for fun.
How long was the eventually? How long did it take?
Maybe 3 weeks.
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Well, let's try it again. See if we can go to the phones and get Ryan Cantrell, Vice President of Government Affairs for American Federation of Children. Ryan, are you there?
I'm here, Phil.
Yay! All right, we got it.
We did it.
Give me some applause, man. Just go ahead and play the applause right now. We got whatever technical issues we're glitching this out of the way. But hey, Ryan, listen, thanks for making time, man, and also thanks for what you do with AFC. But I'll just reach back again and say thank you for what you did when you were here in Alabama.
Well, listen, I'm always happy to be on with you, and it's always great to talk about the great things that are going on across the country, the great things that are going on in Alabama now, in education and giving parents more options, and students getting better outcomes. We're really excited about Alabama, and I mean, like I've told you before, I mean the school choice movement is really sweeping the nation. no matter what the unions try to do, we're going to keep pushing back, and parents, are starting to kind of understand, what's going on in the public school system and what's really driving the train there. And we're just excited about what's going on across the country.
Well, yeah, I am too, and I'm excited that in spite of everything that the teachers union tried to do to stop it, that school choice became finally full-fledged in Alabama legislation. But let me ask you, man. I mean, I know you were there with us back in the day. I said earlier in the show before you came on that I feel like there are members of our current legislative body that just don't have the battle scars that we used to have, and maybe have gotten softer on the teachers union, the AEA in Alabama. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's a couple things. First, I mean, I think it's hard to really conceptualize how far the state of Alabama has come over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
15 years ago, the state legislature was controlled by Democrats. And it wasn't until, January of 2026, well, I guess December of 2024, I'm sorry, it wasn't until December of 2010 that Republicans took control of the state legislature. And for, the whole time before that, Democrats had basically been a de facto arm of the teachers union, and vice versa to a certain degree. You had Paul Hubbard, the former head of the Alabama Education Association. He was the most powerful person in Alabama.
Oh yeah.
I remember hearing stories as a staffer when we were there about Paul Hubbard sitting in the gallery. And when it came time for a vote, you'd see everybody in the legislature turn around and look at Paul Hubbard and see whether he was giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Yep.
And that's how you voted. And so I think, over those next 3 years, while I was there, while you were there, and many, many others, I mean, y'all took some shots, trying to right size education in Alabama. Putting power back in the hands of parents, making sure that kids and students were the priority in the classroom, and were a priority in our education system. And for those who don't remember, 2014 was not a fun election year. I mean, Republicans did very well. State legislators did really well. But the Alabama Education Association came back with a vengeance and spent, $20 odd million trying to defeat these Republican legislators that had, tried to take away some of their power, not only over the education system, but over the, political system in Alabama writ large. And so, yeah, I mean, those battle scars, may seem like a long time ago, but it was really just a decade ago when all of this was going on. And so what you've seen is the teachers union since then say, okay, well, we aren't going to be able to beat them. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to really start playing in these primaries, where we're going to have to start, giving a little bit of money to these guys so that they start at least taking our meetings and start hearing us out. And what we've seen is over the last 10 years, political giving from the teachers union has really shifted from what was primarily a Democratic operation to one that is, they're giving to Republicans, 67, 68% of their money goes to Republicans every year.
Yeah.
And so it's a total change in their strategy. And yeah, I think that, the current crop of folks just don't remember that time when, man, it was really hard to get things done unless they wanted it done. Let
me ask you, I distinctly remember watching the teachers union get involved in non-education legislation, which just used to boggle my mind. Like, why are you here? What are you doing? Why do you care about this bill? Well, they cared about it because it was more of a fight against conservatism as much as anything. But you see it even more on the national level. I'm appalled at the way the head of the AFT, Randy Weingarten, and the head of the NEA, Becky Pringle, how they conduct themselves in public, and they are literally, stoking riots and calling for the No Kings protest, and then fighting against ICE with illegal immigration roundups. And you're looking at going, what are you doing? You're a teachers union. Why are you out there doing this stuff? You see that on the national level, I'm sure, with your job.
Oh, totally. And I mean, I think, one thing that, the teachers union does every year, AFT, the NEA, they have, when they all get together at their annual meeting, They have business items that they vote on, that their membership votes on. And if you go look at the number of things that are non-education related that they vote to support as a what is supposed to be a public schooling union that is supposed to be looking out for the well-being of children, so few of those things have to do with education. And you could take that a step further. If you go back 4 or 5 years, back in 2019, there was a business item that was submitted for a vote that would, quote, rededicate itself, the teachers union, to the pursuit of increased student learning in every public school in America. They voted down that business
Oh
item.
my gosh.
They said, no, that's not what we're going to do. All the while they're voting on all these other things that have very little to do with education or making education better for our kids.
Well, now in Alabama, one of the things that we did, Ryan, I know you remember, is we changed the ability of the teachers union to almost make itself a mandatory participation event. And new teachers were shocked to find out they didn't have to give $60, $80, $100 a month to the AEA. Is that around the nation? Are you seeing? We got about a minute and a half to 2 minutes left here. Around the nation, are you seeing a trend to basically their membership going down, or at the very least their dues going down?
I mean, at the macro level, listen, they're going to figure out a way to raise money. But I do think there are places. I mean, there in Miami-Dade, for example. Their teachers union nearly got decertified because they just didn't have enough members. There were so many members that were walking out. So I think you're seeing that at a micro scale. At the macro scale, we haven't really seen that, but something for your listeners to think about. If you had to guess, what is the number of dollars that the teachers union takes in annually? It's close to $3 billion.
Wow.
That they bring in. They bring in every single year. That's more than most presidential campaigns spend. And they're bringing this money in every year. And it's not to go to the classroom. It's not to support, learning environments or anything like that. It's to expend political power. It's to spend in elections. It's to spend in advocacy. And so these are the things that I don't think the common, the folks who aren't in this stuff every day, like I am or like you are, understand. But this is a massive political machine that we are up against.
It really is.
I'm just so excited about the fact that parents are pushing back, and we're really entering in what could be a golden age of education with what they've been doing at the federal level, what we're seeing at the state level. Parents are pushing back. Parents are getting options, and they're exercising those.
Yep.
Our kids are going to be the better for it.
Ryan, I got to leave it there, man. The music's about to play. I apologize for whatever technical issue we had, but your input was perfect as always. So thanks for what you do, man. Thanks for American Federation of Children being on the money. All right.
Hey, thank you, Phil.
All right. Take care. That was Ryan Cantrell with the American Federation for Children. All right. Listen, coming up next, we're going to talk about China's farm grab. Yes, they are. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We'll be right back. Really?
Yeah, because he had just the way it actually happened is he had just launched a t-shirt store on ProWrestlingTees.com. So the idea would be if you were no longer contracted by WWE, but you still had a little bit of name recognition, think like $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. Yeah. Then they were selling shirts that looked like the $1 Million Man's jacket. It's just a black t-shirt, but it looks like it. So it's just a fun, if you get it, it's retro wrestling, you get it. Well, he had some for his brother Love character that he portrayed in 1988. And I said, here's the thing. I can sell some mortgages. You can sell some T-shirts. What's the downside? So we started doing the show, and before we knew it, we were getting hundreds of thousands of listens on every episode.
How cool was that?
And what's interesting is the day that show debuted, and that's really the one that put us on the map, and we won Sports Illustrated's Podcast of the Year and all that other stuff. That show debuted on the very same day I had my first date with my now wife.
No
so
kidding.
It's a pretty important day in the history of my life.
Remember the date?
August 3rd.
Okay.
August 3rd.
Don't go down that road and not name
That's
the date.
right. That's right. That's right.
Well, that's very cool. And so how long did that one run?
It's still going now.
Oh, that's the one that's still going.
What's interesting is we started in 2016, in August of 2016, and by February of 2019, Vince McMahon had called and hired him back to work in creative. And as we're talking now, he's the executive vice president and creative director of WWE. So depending on who you ask, he's one of the 5 or 6 most influential people in wrestling. but it was our podcast that sort of was the foray in him getting back into it. So with the success of the Bruce Show, I said, hey, that was the WWF side of things. What if we did one for their biggest competitor, WCW? And I reached out to Tony Schiavone, who was on TBS from 1983 until 2001.
Yeah.
But then he left and started calling minor league baseball. And when I met him, he actually was working at Starbucks because his family needed insurance. And I said, hey, man, here's what I did with Bruce. I think, we could make some money here and raise the profile for you if you were interested. And the timing was perfect because he had just found out his daughter was getting married. He had a new wedding bill coming, and he's like, hey, let's do it. So we made a gentleman's agreement. I'll sell some mortgages, and I'll let you keep all the ad revenue until we get this wedding paid for. Well, when it was done, we just kind of assumed, well, is that the end of the podcast? And we did a podcast from the wedding reception where we announced, no, we're not canceling the podcast. We're going to keep it going. Well, when Tony Khan, whose father owns the Jacksonville Jaguars, decided he wanted to open his own wrestling league, he was a big listener to our podcast. So he reached out and said, can you get me in touch with Schiavone? I want him to do what he's doing for you, for us. So now every Wednesday night he's on TBS and every Saturday night he's on TNT.
Isn't that
Tony
cool?
Schiavone's back in wrestling. So
Isn't that cool? It's
super fun.
It's just amazing. And you call it the accidental podcaster.
Yes.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think anything's an accident.
I agree.
And I don't think anything about what you described was accidental either. It's obvious your entrepreneurial spirit keeps kicking in.
Oh yeah. I'm having a blast.
Well, that also comes out. Let me ask you this. Podcasting ain't where it stops.
No.
Now you got a thing called StarCast.
That's right.
So StarCast is like legit and brings in people from all over the world. And
Comic-Con for wrestling.
there you go. I mean, it's literally, it's a conference. It's multi-days long, and it brings in all the personalities and the crowds. And you just had one, didn't you? Or did you?
We've got one coming up.
Coming up. That's right.
This July, and right next to where the Cowboys play, it's actually where the Rangers play at Globe Life Field. There's a hotel right in that
Well, how
same
did this start?
parking
You went
lot.
from podcasting, and now you're doing conferences. What's the genesis of that?
Well, it's a great story. The major league in wrestling for years and years and years, since 2001, had been WWE and pretty much WWE only. And the leading journalist, we'll call it like what Mel Kiper is to the NFL draft, in the wrestling space, his name's Dave Meltzer. And he has a newsletter called the Wrestling Observer Newsletter. And Dusty Rhodes, another famous old school wrestler,
Oh, yeah.
his youngest son, Cody, had grown frustrated with WWE Creative. So he quit probably a $500,000 a year job and bet on himself, saying, I think I can do better outside the tent. So he was hitting the indies and doing well. But a fan asked Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter on Twitter, do you think anyone outside of WWE could ever sell a 10,000 seat arena in the
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Just covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all, I'm talking about this show. This one, goes like from Huntsville back on over to Chattanooga. I'm talking about from Tuscaloosa back on over to Gadsden. I mean, all the way down to that loveless little village on the plains called Auburn, straight across the border from there to what we call once again Fort Benning. And then big old patches in North Georgia and Mississippi. All thrown in just for good measure. And that's just the radio. Then there's all of y'all that live stream the show every single day on places like X and Rumble and YouTube and our Facebook. And also, oh, by the way, on our website, rightsidemedia.org. And then all you podcasters that catch the show after the fact. What I'm saying is there's a bunch of you, bunches of you. And we appreciate you more than you could possibly know. So thank you very much. Get a few text messages before I move on. Let's see what we got here. Jeff Rowe from Indiana says, Phil, until such time as we separate schools being run and owned by government entities instead of private institutions and assign students the money instead of government, the teachers' unions are unstoppable because they control too many legislators with their money. Well, I think you just summed the whole thing up there, Jeff. That's about right, buddy. And by the way, I don't mind the idea of state-funded schools. I'm not going to try and say we should not have any state-funded schools. But what I do believe is that we should have the tax dollars follow the child. And you should not be bound by your zip code. Gone are the days when, people didn't travel around as much. We weren't as mobile as society. You could do everything in one neighborhood. It doesn't work that way anymore. And if you're trapped in a bad school district, you shouldn't be required to stay there just because your parents can't afford to move. So I'm glad we're moving away from that. Mike from Florence says, in the rare event that a teacher is removed from the classroom, they're too often kept on the payroll doing something else, usually just goofing off. So I've even read about some that quit coming in while still getting a check and full benefits, all due to the teachers unions. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. People get put on paid leave while they go through their mandatory appeal process where the union steps in to make sure they're not just terminated at will because, tenure. By the way, where else in the world do you get tenure? Where else in the world do you get tenure? Think about it. I can't think of any. So tenure, in my opinion, is one of the downfalls of education. And I know some people out there going to go, Phil, you can't say that. Sure, I can. I think it's one of the downfalls of education. It disincentivizes the requirement for someone to be good. And by the way, there's good tenured teachers. I get that. There really are. I mean, I know one sweet lady, a former neighbor of mine who's about to retire after 40 years of teaching in the same school. But y'all, tenure also protects bad teachers. It also disincentivizes the ability to, cause people to be at their best because they don't have to fear being gone. It's ridiculous. If I was doing a horrible job, I would expect to get reprimanded. But if you're a really, really bad teacher, but you have tenure, sometimes it's more trouble to get rid of you than it is just to put up with you. It's awful. Brand spanking new texter in the line calls himself Weasel from Decatur. Weasel from Decatur. Can anyone explain, he says, how our public school students benefited from Randy Weingarten's 4 trips to Ukraine? They didn't. Not a bit. Weasel, we're glad you're in the text lines. Thank you for joining us. Matt from Madison says, is it my imagination or doesn't the fall of our educational system align with the rise of the teachers unions? That's a reasonable assumption. Thank you for aligning the stars that way. Matt and Madison. John from Huntsville says, hey, JP, have you been taking advice from the WVNN technical team? Oh, I just read out and then I realized what I was reading. Wow, dude, I'm sorry.
No, because I actually fixed the issue when it happened.
Oh, wait. What sound effect do you want for your response to that? That's actually really good. Nice. Well played, sir. Thank you very much. Pull the pin on that grenade. Just drop it. Jay from Killen, Alabama says, filling the gaps in the YouTube broadcast is a tremendous idea. Okay, give yourself another boom. Just another one. Let's go ahead. You got it. Perfect. JP's on the money. All right. We're going to switch gears here. Dipper number 2. We have about 20 minutes-ish to work with. Have you seen the stories about China scarfing up farmland in the United States? It's a weird story, man. And it's also one of the things you look at and go, okay, that appears to be too strategic for it to be an accident. So I got a piece here dating back to September of last year. Ran in 1819 News. U.S. Senators Katie Britt and Tommy Tuberville together led a group of colleagues into introducing the Protecting American Agriculture from Foreign Adversaries Act of 24. It was basically designed to promote food security and not allow the enemies of the United States to come in, scarf up our farmland, and then make it very difficult for us to raise our own, farm produce. That's a thing. That's a serious potential here. Tuberville said at the time, in the last decade alone, we've seen a surge of over 35% in foreign land purchases, including in my home state of Alabama. We can't give our adversaries like China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran room to negatively influence our agricultural supply chains and food production. Food security is national security, and that's why he's introduced the legislation. Okay, I don't think that one passed yet, but they're still working the issue. And now that we have the majority and we have the president, we can see more things happen. But I bring you to another story on 1819 News in June of last year. June of last year, the New York Post compiled a list of Chinese farmland acquisitions near U.S. military facilities. That had to have been quite the research project. Just basically going out there and finding out who's bought up land, what company is that? Oh, that's a Chinese-owned company. And you had 19 military bases, some of which are very strategic. 19 military bases where Chinese purchasers were scarfing up large tracts of land in and around, or not in, but around these military sites. They began calling them China Groves. Thank you, Doobie Brothers, for giving us that name. China Groves were places like Fort Bragg, Fort Hood in Texas, Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton in San Diego, MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa. Y'all, these are major installations. At the point this article was written in June of last year, there were no Alabama farmlands reportedly being purchased by Chinese in and around Alabama bases like Fort Rucker and Maxwell Air Force Base and others. But Alabama does have a law. Now, here's my point. Yes, you can legislate this. It has not been challenged. I see no reason why it can't. Now, the question becomes, are you depriving a property owner from the ability to sell their land? No, but you are depriving them from selling it to someone who's an enemy of the state. But in May of 2023, our Alabama legislature, good on them. I'll call good things and bad things, right? So balls and strikes here. They good on them. They passed the Alabama Property Protection Act. We are one of the states now that takes protections to prevent China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea from scarfing up farmland in and around the state of Alabama. Governor Ivey signed it. It is the law of the state. At the time, it was sponsored by House Majority Leader Scott Stothagen from up in the Hartselle area and Senator David Sessions from down in Grand Bay. But it's a big deal. We're one of the few states that has actually taken active measures to stop China from this mysterious land grab that they've got going on. Now, the thing that brought all this to the forefront for me was an article on Breitbart that came out yesterday. Breitbart has a headline on the story that says, "We're the United States, but they treat us like a colony." And I thought, what? And I looked at it, and it says the USDA's farm security plan targets China's bioterrorism and land grabs. Wait a minute. So it's not just like individual states seeing something happening. It's not just like, anecdotal information. Or now we're watching as the U.S. Department of Agriculture under the Trump administration is saying formally, its National Farm Security Action Plan has been put in place. They are rallying other Trump administration officials, Republican governors, and lawmakers around an effort to protect American farmland, food supply chains, and agricultural research from foreign threats, especially from China. It's risen to that level. It has risen to that level that we are now not only talking about states getting concerned and maybe just red states taking action. Now we're watching the U.S. government saying, this is a thing and it's got to stop. We'll take a break right now. We'll come back from the break and I'll tell you more. China's land grab. Yep. Some call it a farm grab. Yep. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Again. And Dave said, nope, I don't see it. And Cody couldn't help himself, being the son of a legend like the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and says, I'll take that bet, Dave. So he got together with the Young Bucks, a fabulous tag team out of California, and they agreed that they would put their money where their mouth is, and they would rent the Sears Arena in Hoffman Estates on the outskirts of Chicago. It was a 10,000-seater, and they were going to put tickets on sale and make a big splash and try to prove Dave wrong, that wrestling doesn't start and end with WWE. It can exist outside of there. Well, I got engaged that January, and we did it in Mexico. The engagement, I mean, when I say did it. So I bump into Cody at International Baggage Claim. He's coming back from like the Japanese equivalent of WrestleMania. It happens on January 4th every year in Tokyo at the Tokyo Dome. It's called Wrestle Kingdom for New Japan Pro Wrestling. So he's trying to be low key. He's in a hoodie, but I saw him and he saw me, but we wind up texting each other like, hey, good to see you, that sort of thing. And I took my shot. I said, hey man, I know you guys are planning a big show. You haven't announced any details yet, but people are going to piggyback you around your event, and they're going to have ancillary events, smaller independent wrestling events, little conventions with legends or meet and greets and that sort of thing. Yeah. What if you just co-opted me and I created like a convention based around wrestling podcasters? So you would sort of co-opt all the media and coverage for your event and make it feel bigger.
What year are we talking about?
2018.
Okay.
So we could do, weigh-ins and press conferences. And I just want to make your event feel bigger than just the one, hey, we're going to the arena for this 3-hour event and that's it. Let's make it a whole destination for wrestling fans for the weekend. He loved the idea. I asked that I put it on paper so he could show Matt and Nick of the Young Bucks. They loved it. Asked a fourth partner, Kenny Omega, who at the time was the New Japan World Champion. He liked it. So we launched it. And what we created was like the Woodstock of wrestling. I have to admit, I did not know what I was doing, but that's how all business is. At first, you're just trying to figure it out as you go.
Ain't that the truth?
So we didn't know what we didn't know. And I probably sold too many tickets.
You were probably better off not knowing, as a matter of fact, going into it
Absolutely.
to some degree.
Not knowing led to me creating some stuff that other people have copied and some stuff they didn't copy, and thankfully was never repeated because it didn't work. But that's how you learn. You do A and B testing, and we do more of what works and less of what doesn't.
So did they win the bet on the first one? Did they fill the arena?
They sold it out in a half hour. Didn't take any time at all. We set all kinds of records, and the idea was that was sort of proof of concept for Tony Khan, who I mentioned owns the Jaguars,
Right.
to create his own company called All Elite Wrestling. So that happened on September 1st, 2018. And on January 1st, 2019, they announced that Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks had just formed their brand new company with Tony Khan called All Elite Wrestling, which is where my buddies Jeff Jarrett, Jim Ross, and Tony Schiavone, that I'll do all their podcasts, they're all with AEW now. And I don't know without All In that AEW would even exist. So to know that I was even remotely involved in any of that. And then when Tony did the little kickoff announcement saying, hey, we're creating a new rival league and our top star is going to be Chris Jericho, that was a big surprise because he's a well-established name.
Yeah.
He wanted to host a rally outside of the Jaguar Stadium in Jacksonville in the parking lot. And he called me to host it and MC it. And I'm like, I'm a mortgage guy from Gunnersville. Why am I here? I'm like the Forrest Gump of wrestling, but I got to do it and jumped at the chance.
That's what you are. You're the Forrest Gump of wrestling.
I am. I'm
you don't even realize how much you've touched. You just keep on touching.
I guess. You got any Dr. Pepper around here?
Somewhere.
Right?
A box of chocolates.
Just want to say this. Megan is not Jenny. I just need to get that on the record. Nothing like Jenny or Jenny. But maybe that makes Cassio my Bubba.
That's what it is.
I like that.
It's got to be.
I like that.
So let me ask you, you went from podcasting, so-called accidentally.
Yeah.
That grew into more and more podcasting.
That's right.
That grew into success with launching other podcasts, then StarCast. And you've also, oh, by the way, had a gig on Vice TV.
Well, that was, again, wrestling related.
Sure.
But there's a fabulous show called Dark Side of the Ring.
Right.
And before it was launched, they invited Bruce and I into their studios in New York to do a screener of their very first episode, the pilot, you might call it, about Bruiser Brody. And we loved it. And so Bruce and Eric and everybody else I was working with, I sort of closed the gap and helped facilitate some of those guests. And I still do. If I have a number on someone they can't find, and just really believe in what Evan and Jason have been doing with that series. So during the pandemic, there was an appetite for more of that content. So they wanted to do something called Dark Side of the Ring Confidential, where they aired clips that had never been seen before, and we added some more context to the behind the scenes of the creation of that. So they asked us right in the middle of the pandemic to shoot this at the former East.
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Pulling pins on truth grenades. That's what we're doing. Hey, so text it in if you want to, 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Give me your thoughts. What do you think about the idea of China being banned from buying up farmland in the United States? Well, I told you before the break, I picked up a story off of Breitbart. I hold it right here in my calloused former paratrooper hands. So our agricultural secretary, Brooke Rollins, was just recently, at the request of Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, made a member of what's known as the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. And the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States is a group of high-ranking cabinet members in the White House who look at who's buying land and stays on top of it, basically. And Tuberville insisted that the agriculture secretary needs to be a part of that, and it made good sense. So yeah, Brooke Rollins, agriculture secretary, she's now on a committee that can take a look at where and when adversaries like China, North Korea, Iran, and others are buying up our farmland. She also announced that they were unveiling what's known as the National Farm Security Action Plan. which is designed to monitor and maintain the ability of the nation to not lose track of its farmland and basically cede its rights away to foreign governments. I got a bunch of commentary here in this one article. It's like Breitbart went out and got a comment from everybody. All God's children were commenting, but one of them is counselor to the president, Peter Navarro. Navarro said, "We're the United States, but they treat us like a colony," meaning China. He said that Chinese acquisition was just purchased Smithfield Foods and a company called Syngenta that's basically a seed company. He said seeds can be the revolution that keeps the world fed, and now China owns a key part of it. Attorney General Pam Bondi pointed out that just recently we had 2 Chinese nationals who were recently charged in Michigan. Remember this? Bringing in agro-terrorism weapons. Basically, it's for research. We just want to research it, but they're smuggling it in their luggage, knowing full well they weren't supposed to. And if they'd have gotten loose, it could have a devastating effect on agribusiness. Defense Secretary Pete Heck says that he wants to know who's got land in and around the bases over which he has purview. Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem, she said that in her experience, food policy is national security policy, and we've got to maintain control of our farmland. I got like Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders from Arkansas. I got Governor Pillen from Nebraska. In fact, Nebraska, they joined Alabama in 2023. They also passed their own law that dealt with Chinese interests buying up property in the state. But then there's our U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville again, who's one of the most outspoken members, advocates of this issue in the U.S. Senate. He stressed in this article, that foreign adversaries, he says, own over 2 million acres of farmland in Alabama alone. I had not heard that.
I was very taken aback by that when I saw that.
Yeah, 2 million.
That's a staggering number.
I don't know how many acres are in Alabama, but, 2 million. So he says foreign entities or adversaries actually own over 2 million acres of farmland in our state.
Yeah, not just foreign adversaries.
Yeah. Yep. That's what he says. He says, we got to be number 1. We can't be number 2. We got to fight back. They're coming into our country and they're buying up our farmland. Now, Breitbart ends the article by saying that the federal government is exploring a federal solution to stop China from buying up American farmland. Yes, they are. Calling it one of the very, very top national security priorities, warning that much of the land is located near U.S. military posts. So more to come on this, but I got to tell you, here we are. We just had an announcement that China is going to be prevented from buying up our farmland. And guess what happened this morning? Newsweek. Response from China. China's not happy. They don't like being maligned. They want our stuff. China issues a warning over Trump farmland ban. Issues a warning? Saying it will only backfire. The United States has overstretched the concept of national security in restraining other countries and entities' rights to purchase land. I got news. Your rights end where our law says they end. And I don't know that we need China buying up our farmland. Thank you. Thank you very much. But yes.
Especially land around our military bases.
Yeah.
How would they feel if we bought land around their military bases?
It would not. By the way, I'm pretty sure that in China, we can't go buy land.
No, last time I checked, no. I don't think China is in a position to have a moral argument against us.
I wouldn't think so, no. But yeah, it's a disturbing trend if you get down to it. And China does not like being outed on this. I will say, too, one of the things that we had to deal with, did you hear about Confucius Institutes? Did you know about that?
I do not.
Okay, so it was a thing all over the nation. And there were 2 in Alabama, one of which was at Alabama A&M in Huntsville. The other was at Troy University. Confucius Institutes. It's where China gives a whole lot of money to an American college in order to set up a pro-China study line, and even sometimes funding like scholarships and fellowships and internships and a complete line of pro-China dogma that's couched as if it's like a degree in international relations kind of thing. Look it up real quick. Confucius Institutes, and I think we got rid of them in Alabama.
Well, the one of the nationals arrested that you mentioned earlier was working at Michigan State? I think it was as a professor. So like they're clearly targeting our institutions.
Probably being paid by the NIH. Probably Fauci money. got some of that Fauci money, went to work. Listen, the end result is you got to watch this. It's part of controlling our borders. And I'm not saying let's shut ourselves off, become the hermit kingdom. No, but what I am saying is if there's a foreign entity that does not have our best interest at heart, why would we let them scarf up land? They wouldn't let us buy it in their country. I guarantee you. So yes, I completely agree. And the Confucius Institutes that had to go to, that was awful. You find them?
Yeah, it says Confucius Institutes are public educational and cultural promotion programs of the state of China. The stated aim of the program is to promote Chinese language, culture, support local Chinese teachings internationally, and facilitate cultural exchanges.
Can you go one step further? Just go ahead and Google whether there's any in Alabama still. I think the last one even had, I think it was even brick and mortar in Troy.
Okay, so actually there's an 1819 article. This one's from 2022 though. It says there's currently 18.
18 in Alabama?
Yes. As of June 2022, there were 18. Or excuse me. Okay, sorry, 18 in the United States. Two were in Alabama.
Thank you. That's what I thought I remembered.
Alabama A&M and then Troy are the only two. That's in June of 2022.
Well, I got it right. I remember that. Amazing sharp memory, Phil. Amazing. All right, Mike from Florence checking in. He goes, at the time, I thought it was racist for Florence City Councilman Sam Pendleton to oppose a deal with China. A few years later, I understood the opposition. Florence Candle, and then he sends me a link to the article. Yeah, good on him. Good for you, Sam Pendleton. And that was a good call. Maybe he was ahead of his time. What's amazing is the fact that China plays the long game. It's well known. They do. They're in it for the long haul, and they believe that they are chess masters. All right, they believe that they are planning 3, 4, and 5 steps ahead of the first move. That may be true. They do think strategically, but they also are not afraid to just basically get in your face. All said and done, we got to take care of this. We can't let it go on. And I appreciate the fact that our U.S. delegation, including Senator Tommy Tuberville, have taken a very active role in trying to ensure that U.S. national security interests are not just sacrificed to people turning a blind eye or taking the payoff check from Chinese farm interests buying up our land. All right, there you go. That's 2 dippers down. We're headed right now into the Grand Council with my brethren, Jeff Poore and Dale Jackson. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Arena in South Philadelphia. So Cassio and I jumped in my car and drove all the way up there because we didn't want to fly because this is the COVID era. So here we are slipping around in a car that doesn't have 4-wheel drive, driving on iced over streets with really just sheets of ice, hoping, is that the Airbnb they put us up in? Because at the time, we're not even staying in hotels. It was really crazy, but we did it, and it was a blast. And, yeah, I never imagined that I would be on television. Like, guys who look and sound like me are not supposed to be on television. But there I was, thankful for the opportunity.
Well, I mean, this has been a cool walk, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
It still is. I
Yes.
mean, and I don't know if it's been a walk or a run or both, but
At times, both.
yeah. But then you got a call in 2023.
Yes.
And you have now been inducted into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Yeah, in Waterloo, Iowa.
What the heck?
I can't believe it. Like, they have an award there called the Gordon Soley Award, who's arguably the dean of professional wrestling, just one of the greatest voices and commentary professionals, play-by-play in the history of wrestling. So he was the first recipient, and the second recipient was what I consider the real voice of wrestling of my generation, Jim Ross.
Okay.
And when they had a committee and they voted on who should be the next to receive the award, they chose me. And at that point, I had never actually worked for a wrestling organization beyond my WWE Network TV show. And I kind of thought, are you sure? Like, there's so many other worthwhile and worthy individuals. But they asked, and I answered and said yes. And to my surprise, Bruce agreed to come in and give my induction speech and introduce me. And even more added pressure, I thought, hey, I'm the nobody. So at least we'll get it out of the way early, and then we can go to dinner. No, they wanted me to go last. And now it's like you have all this pressure of everyone looking at it. It's like, I'm not even supposed to be here.
And
like,
now for our keynote speaker.
Right. And I'm not even a wrestler. I've never taken a bump, as they call it in the wrestling ring. I shouldn't be up here. But I was very thankful and appreciative that last year I was able to nominate, and there was 100% unanimous votes for that Tony Schiavone.
How about that?
Went in the Hall of Fame, and that was his very first Hall of Fame. And he started broadcasting wrestling in '83.
Wow.
And to think I may have had a hand in nominating him to go into the Hall of Fame in 2024 was just surreal. So
You're just
very thankful.
you're just gumping again.
Gumping, man.
You're just gumping the entire time.
Gumping it. By the way, shout out to Waterloo, Iowa. It's the Thez and Tragos Hall of Fame, the Dan Gable Museum in Waterloo, Iowa. It's going down this July. I'll be there again. This year, Eric Bischoff's going in. So I'm pumped about that.
Is there a special jacket? Do you wear like a Ric Flair robe? What do you wear when you go to an award ceremony?
No,
like that?
I mean, I think they want you to wear a suit, but they do give you a cool plaque, and your name is displayed there in the museum. And I mean, just the idea that I'm in a professional wrestling Hall of Fame as the mortgage
That is
guy.
very
If
cool.
you could tell 7-year-old me that, it would blow his mind. It'd be the coolest
That is
thing
very.
ever.
That is absolutely very cool. All right, so you got this crazy life. Did you ever imagine this stuff? I mean, you've definitely got two sides to your professional life. Both of them are still gainful and still going.
Yeah.
And both of them are still time takers, and both of them you still have people that work for you here, there, and the other, and you're running and gunning. Did you ever imagine? I mean, where'd you come from? Where did Conrad Thompson does he come out of the womb as an entrepreneur, or did something happen? What got you to the point that you are able to step into entrepreneurship with this kind of brash boldness that you seem to project right now?
Well, that's an interesting question. First of all, I appreciate that. I like brash boldness. If that's the way people describe me, that
Let me
would
write
be
that
cool,
down for you.
right?
Brash
Yeah,
and bold.
I like
Right.
it. No, my grandfather, I guess maybe this is part of it. He was in the Amway business and did really well.
Oh, wow.
I never even studied Amway, but I guess people get impressed when I say he was double diamond. I guess that's a thing. I don't know. But I guess he did pretty well at that. And then, unfortunately, he and my grandmother got divorced, and things were never the same for either of them after that. But my mom partnered with my grandmother, and they started a domiciliary. You and I, being country folks, might call it an old folks home, where they're not quite ready to go to, full-time care like a nursing home, but they do need somebody to just help them around the house and that sort of thing. So they created that. And then my dad he worked at the prison system. He was a security guard or a prison guard, and he would, do drug tests and whatever other tasks they had him handle at the prison there. But that wasn't enough. They needed more income. So Dad started selling insurance part-time, and then he started selling vacuum cleaners part-time, and that proved to be more lucrative. And eventually my dad was earning far more money selling vacuum cleaners in the evenings and on weekends than he was working for the state as a security guard at the prison. So he had an opportunity to have his own territory, and eventually he jumped at it. So we went from Prattville, Alabama, a suburb of Montgomery, up to Gunnersville, and that's where I graduated high school. But I saw my parents' life change from where, Mom was telling me, don't answer the phone, that's grown folks' business. Those are bill collectors.
Yeah.
And I learned things like if you mail the cable bill to the power company and the power bill to the cable company, it'll buy you a few more days. So I grew up with that. And I remember wanting to be able to do better and provide more for my mom. And so when I saw that become a realization, now we're taking fancy trips to Cancun, and we have a 2-story house and an in-ground pool, and Mom's driving a Lincoln. I remember what that felt like. So I just decided right then, hey, I'm going to be in sales. I want to do sales.
How about that?
So when I was a sophomore at Gunnersville High School, I got as silly as this sentence sounds, a full ride at Sneed. But Sneed State Community College had a program called the Ambassador Program, and if you were chosen to be one of the Marshall County ambassadors through a series of testing and interviews and things like that, they would allow you to go to Sneed. So I did that. And in 2000, Van Scott, who was my business professor, and I had so many classes with him, he said something along the lines of, now, folks, if you keep your nose clean and you keep your head down, some of you in this room could earn up to $35,000 a year.
Which sounded like money.
But I reached in my book bag at the end of class, and I realized here we are in September, and my year to date is like $60,000.
There you go.
So I came to Van after the room had cleared out, and I said, hey, I think this was my last class. And he says, are you dropping the class? Because I'd had several with Mr. Scott. And I said, no, I think I'm dropping school. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you said if I keep my head down and I keep my nose clean, I could earn $35,000 a year, but here's my paycheck stub. And he looks at it, and he looked up at me and said, son, you make more than me. Why are you here? And patted me on the arm, and that was it. I never went back.
How about that?
And before I knew it, I moved to Huntsville because I wanted to be where the people were. If you're in a sales job, you need to go where the people are.
Yeah.
So living in Gunnersville, 6,000 people at the time or whatever it is, I went to Huntsville, rented an apartment, and 11 months later, I bought a house, and mortgages, here we come.
Well, so looking back to your family, I mean, I heard a couple things in there. I heard work ethic.
Oh yeah.
I heard my pastor said just last Sunday, actually, he said, if solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to hour number 3 on the hump day. All right. So it's hour number 3. We play the camel at the beginning of the show. That means beginning of hour number 3, we go into a thing we call it the Grand Council. I bring in 2 of my recalcitrant brethren in talk radio, and we ping each other with questions and to see where we go. So let me call the roll, make sure we have a quorum. Looking to the northward at 770 AM 92.5 FM WVNN's Cumulus Broadcasting. Oh, by the way, he's the host of the Dale Jackson Show, does a gig with Yellowhammer, has some kind of TV thing. Dale Jackson, are you there? You are indeed. Stand at ease. All right, looking southward, all the way down yonder on the Gulf of America. I'm talking about the host of the Jeff Poor Show on FM Talk 106.5, editor-in-chief of 1819 News, does some stuff with Breitbart. He's probably also a spy. Hey, Jeff Poor, are you there?
I'm present.
You are indeed. All right, I pronounce a quorum. Hit it, JP.
Assemble the Grand Council.
Ta-da! All right, Dale Jackson, you're first. What you got?
All right. I just want to talk about this a little bit because it seems to be bubbling up yet again. The amnesty talk. Donald Trump mentioned it at a rally. He mentioned hospitality individuals and farm workers. And then the agricultural commissioner, or the secretary of agriculture, came out and said there will be no amnesty for farm workers. And I thought to myself, you haven't really mentioned the hospitality people. And what's that all about? Are we seriously looking at a potential amnesty here?
You first, Jeff. What you thinking?
No, I don't. I mean, they could look at it if they want. There is absolutely no way they could get amnesty through the House and the Senate. They've used all the political capital on the big, beautiful bill. There's no way you're going to get any Republican support for that. Well, maybe you'll get 25% of it, but it's not going to be enough to pass.
No, I totally agree. And by the way, it wasn't just the ag secretary who, by the way, is speaking about ag. She doesn't have hotels in her purview, so there's that. But then I think there was 3 other cabinet members, and including the president, who said there's not going to be any amnesty. So
I mean, he said it 2 days before that.
There are times when Trump, it's almost like he thinks out loud while he's on the air. Like, maybe we got to find a way to help with this. Maybe we got to do a big, beautiful thing. But then when he comes out and says policy, I mean, he was very affirmative when he said, ain't going to be no amnesty. Okay. So I think you're going to see an increased ability to do worker visas. You're probably going to find some legal means by which the farmers can get people to pick tomatoes in the field. But I do not think you're going to see amnesty for the dreamers and all the things they've talked about on the Democrat side for years. I just don't see it. Your own thoughts. What do you got? Your question is it?
I think you're
right. Love right now. Is that what you're going to do?
No. I just think that it's interesting to hear this bubble up yet again, and maybe it's an attempt to sow division. I don't know, but it was based on his own words, and that kind of showed you that it was at least entered his mind.
Well,
maybe it entered it.
That's because you keep watching MSNBC, and that's where you get your talking points from. So.
Okay, that's right. Yes, I'm so sorry. I apologize for that. It was also, I believe it was something called a Trump rally where he said it.
Okay, all right. Jeff, next question. What do you got?
This really bothers me. That probably not on Dale's radar at all. It might be on yours, Senator.
Damn.
The not reappointing Lee Guafney for the Pardons and Paroles Board. And that I don't know. There's never an explanation for any of this stuff. They went with the guy in Jackson County. I'm sure he's fine, but a lot of these victims groups are, in that space are not particularly thrilled. And did Gay Ivey cave to Democrats and give like the Beth Shelburns and the Chris Englands what they wanted here?
Well, that's a great question. And so I just became aware of this last night, so I was going to dig into it more. But I don't know the full answer to this, but I do know this. What I have seen is quite a softening towards what I would call getting rid of people that do the good things in government, like, Kent Davis at the ADVA, or in this case, maybe one of the people on the parole board who we would like to keep on the parole board because he's there for victims' rights. I got a text last night from someone who works with Vocal, which is, the organization that stands up for victims' rights in the legislative process. And they're not happy at all about this. And when they're not happy, my radar goes up because they're the ones who would know better than anybody because they're in tune with who's actually taking care of the victims and not the criminals. There's been so many issues with the parole board. And by the way, it's kind of like libraries. You look at it and go, how is this the most controversial place in the state? But it is. And there's been a like they'll swing the pendulum all the way to where nobody gets paroled. Then they'll swing it back to where everybody gets paroled. And I don't know what they're doing. Going centrist. Dale, your thoughts?
What was it? 21% paroled so far this year, 8% last year, 53% in 2018 or something. And the, like you just said, the pendulum swings there. I'm for the 8% part. I'll just be completely honest with you. So I kind of want somebody there who's going to keep these people in jail. Much to Jeff Porter's chagrin, I was speaking with Cam Ward not too long ago, and he was of the same mind. It's like there's not a problem with not letting these people out of jail. But the problem is we've let a lot of the people out that deserve to be out, and what's left is the people that deserve to be in. And looking at raw numbers like they do at AL.com is just brain dead nonsense. So whoever convinced Kay Ivey that, hey, this is very bad for you is wrong. I mean, but she responds to stuff like that. Too much Kyle Whitmire for Kay Ivey, and she needs to figure out a way to just listen to Jeff Porter and nobody else.
I'll never forget when Sue Bell Cobb was still at the Supreme Court. And she got in my face one day. Of course, she's like 5'1", so she's pointing up at me, and she goes, "Senator, what are you going to tell your constituents about all your hard on crime?" I said, well, "What are you going to tell them about being soft on crime? I don't have a problem with this." But I don't know who she caved into. Jeff, your own question. What are you thinking?
No, I think she absolutely caved. Now, when they cut loose Judge Graddick, when he was, I guess, the old Cam Ward. Before Cam came on and quit the state senate, it was like they made a deal with the Democrats and for maybe votes on a gambling bill or something like that. Did Kay Ivey cut a deal with the Democrats on this? There's just like you get no answers or no explanation. Did she not like the direction of the partisan parole board, that they were way too harsh here? I'm totally. I know this is like a small thing, but I kind of got to be in my bonnet over it. And she is not like, we don't know what's going on. I think it's just indicative of a bigger problem in the Ivey administration.
Well, that may be. And I don't have too much time left, but I got to say, she's a lame duck right now. And is there an agenda? I mean, does the governor's office even have an agenda this late in her tenure? I don't know, because they've never issued one. But if there's an agenda that she's trying to make deals for, what in God's name would it be? So I don't know, man. It's there's been
she's chasing a headline. I mean, I think that's obvious, right? Like she's chasing a positive headline.
Does she know this happened? I mean,
well, one more thing on this, guys. None of the usual suspects, none of the best Shellbirds or Chris Englands or any of those guys who have been harping on this for the last 3 years are doing a victory lap over it. Isn't that odd?
But they aren't complaining either.
Flying under the radar, or maybe they didn't even ask. Who knows? Maybe it just happened.
Well, no, but what I mean by the fact they're not complaining, meaning they're not going to give her credit for anything. They're just not going to bitch about it.
Well, there's that. All right, hey, let me jump in there with a quick question. 1819, y'all ran a story. I just had Catherine Robertson on my show yesterday. I've known her for a number of years, from back in her API days, and working in the legislative processes. She's running for AG, never run for office before, and dang if she didn't just suddenly get $1 million put in her bank account for her running her race. I've never seen $1 million since we had whatever that Democrat's name was, who came out of nowhere in the Porch Creek, gave him $1 million to try and
Joe Hubbard.
Joe Hubbard, thank you. I've never seen a massive tranche like that just dropped on a candidate for AG until now. So is this a show enough race? I mean, is she going the distance here? Because it's obvious that from where it came from, that Steve Marshall, her current boss, probably put in a few good words. But what do you think? Is she going to be the next AG, Jeff?
No, I don't think that's true. I mean, she could be. I'm not saying she won't be, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I still think Judge Mitchell's got a really good shot at it. I don't know. Pam Casey she's fine, but I don't think she can raise money. So that to me, it's still at least a 2.5 person race. And I say half because Casey will take votes away from somebody.
Dale, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think she's been Marshall's right hand woman for a very long time. So you're right about what he's putting his finger on the scale there. That's going to bring in a bunch of money. She's got to be the front runner. And so far, I mean, I know me and Jeff were talking about this off the air a minute ago. There's a Supreme Court justice in that race as well. But I think that her experience in that office is going to help her a lot in helping raise money.
Well, it absolutely is, and I think there's a real thought that she's going to have been working for the guy who's about to possibly be the next U.S. senator, because he does have the name ID in the race right now on that. More to come, but I thought that was a significant impact to the race, because before that she was raising money decently. Now she's got every bit the match on the fundraising needed for this race. All right, taking a break right now. That's round one of the Grand Council with Jeff Poor, Dale Jackson, and this little old me, Phil Williams. Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. Quit, we win.
That's right.
And there was a bit of that mixed in there.
Oh, yeah.
More than work ethic, it sounded like there was also a tenacious effort to not quit.
Absolutely. My dad is my hero, and he instilled a great work ethic in me. He instilled a positive mental attitude. I feel bad for folks who grew up in a household that just breeds negativity. That's not the household I grew up in.
Yeah.
My parents were just drilling into me that I could do anything I wanted. My mom painted a vision for me that one day I'd have Rolls Royces and live behind gates and all this crazy stuff. And then later, as a teenager, Ric Flair did promos on TBS that I was watching on a VHS tape. I'm watching it in 97, but he said it in 87 that he wanted to live in the biggest house on the biggest hill on the big side of town. And he's got a limousine a mile long and blah, blah, blah. So he was talking about swag, as the kids would say in these rap songs today, way back then. And as a 15, 16-year-old, it was like, yeah, that all sounds pretty good. I think I'd like that. And I felt like sales was maybe my ticket there. But I grew up selling, I thought I would sell insurance or I would sell vacuum cleaners like my dad. But then a neighbor next door to our suite in Huntsville at the office suggested that I come sit with him one day, and he taught me about mortgages. And I'm 19 at the time.
How about that?
I don't even know that I don't know how to spell mortgage. I certainly don't know there's 2 G's in it. I would have never guessed that. But I remember looking at it and saying, okay, Jeff, I get we're saying their payment goes from $1,300 to $900. But if their payment goes down $400, how do we make money? Because as a salesperson, I was used to, think of like the car scenario. If you go buy a new car, you're going to get a new payment. So I'm just thinking, wait a minute, we're not charging them more, we're charging them less. Where's the margin for us? I couldn't wrap my head around it. But once I realized, oh no, it's based on the loan value. So you're making your commission on their $300,000 mortgage. Well, as a guy who had been thinking about selling $1,500 vacuum cleaners and making a commission on that, it was like, oh, this could be quite lucrative. So I went and told Dad, hey, Dad, I think I'm going to quit and try this. And Dad and I really came to an impasse because he felt like, hey, I'm only building an outfit here in Huntsville for you to run it. I still had one in
so
Albertville.
That was Dad's company you were looking at.
Yeah, at that point, Dad had an office in Gadsden.
Wow.
He had one in Albertville. He had one in Huntsville. And I was kind of running the Huntsville one, but I was like, Dad, this is another level. So Dad didn't see it. And Dad thought, it was not going to be nearly as lucrative as it was, but it afforded me the opportunity to buy my first house and buy my first Rolex. And when I was a kid, I had to have an Escalade, all that silly stuff. So about a year later, Dad was like, so how do you make money with this? So eventually I got Mom in, I got Dad in, I got my cousins in, I got my uncle in, and I started First Family Mortgage because it really was everybody, my sister's here, everybody's here. So it was a fun way to sort of share that with my parents. I mean, their lifelong dream had always been to own a place in Panama City. And as I'm sitting here with you today, I can say they did it. And it was because of the mortgage business. So it's all been a positive, really fun story, man.
How about that? That is way cool. Well, listen, so all these different parts of your life.
Yeah.
So what's your mode? I mean, do you sleep late? Do you get up early? Are you the guy who's like already scheming before the crack of dawn, or are you the guy who works to the wee hours of the night and then sleeps till 10? What's your mode? I mean, how do you structure your day to get all this done?
Well, my wife decided a couple of years ago she wanted to get into fitness, so she's training for competitions all the time.
Wow.
So I went from being the first person up to now she is. She's up at 3:30 in the morning and at the gym by 4.
No kidding.
As you may have been able to tell, I am not there at 4 in the morning. I am still asleep. But no, I'm up every day before 7 and getting after it. I always usually try to have an 8 a.m. appointment somewhere. Today it was about our big convention in Dallas. But at 9 o'clock, I did a podcast from 9 to 11. I jumped in my car, came straight here to you.
Yeah.
I've guessed that our show would be about 90 minutes. So I have a 1:30 as soon as this finishes for my ride back. And then I've got a 2:30 right behind that. And then I'll pick up a professional wrestler flying in from Mexico at the Huntsville International Airport tonight at 6:45. And I'll take him to dinner and make sure he's situated, and then take him to have some cervezas. And then we'll bring him back to the house and introduce him to the wife before she goes to bed. And we'll do it again tomorrow.
Wash, rinse, repeat.
Every single day from the minute I wake up until I go to bed, I'm doing something that makes money or is fun, or else I'm not doing it. But those are my two prerequisites. I want to have fun or make money. And if I can do both, I'm doing a lot of it.
How about that?
Yeah.
How about that? All right. Let me ask you this. Let's get into other stuff. So
Sure.
you did, Mrs. Thompson used to be a Flair.
Yes.
All right. You met Ric Flair. You told me the story. Y'all were drinking buddies and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then you started doing a podcast together. So I'm sure that not only did you get to And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Man, pulling pins on truth grenades. All right, going back to round 2 of the Grand Council. First question, second round. Dale Jackson, what do you got?
All right, I need you to take your senator hat off and your talk show hat off and put on your lawyer hat here for a second.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
No representation made as a quality legal services provided. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Jabari People shot by a Homewood police officer, by all accounts, I'm guessing, is laid out exactly the way Homewood lays it out. He went for a gun, got shot.
Yeah.
Ben Crump is now here. I'm sick of hearing the idea that, this will ruin the case if they put that information out. It will prejudice the jury. Well, what does all this talk that's happening right now do to the potential jurors? The law they have now is dumb. They need to make it to where the tape is released for any shooting with a police officer after 2 weeks, redact the blood or whatever you need to do. Why don't they just do that? It can't be because it impacts the case. That just can't be a reasonable reason.
Well, it has to be because it impacts the case, because there's no other reason not to. It does impact the case if you divulge evidence in the public sector that could be otherwise exculpatory or needs to be disclosed, first of all, to the defendant, or for that matter, could impact.
But a tape's a tape sentence. But let me just ask this. A tape is a tape. Okay? If it shows him shooting a guy in the back for no reason, it shows him shooting the guy in the back for no reason. If it shows the guy holding the gun, it shows the guy holding the gun. The tape doesn't change because Ben Crump gets sad about it.
Well, and by the way, Ben Crump, I mean, the guy's a rabble rouser. All he does is travel around the nation looking for the next race baiting opportunity.
But he's not here if the tape's released.
He is here if the tape gets released. I guarantee you, in today's modern age,
if it's a good shoot, he's not here. He just stays away.
I think they're going to wind up showing the family the tape. I've not been following this real closely because I get sick of things like Ben Crump. But Jeff, you can weigh in if you want to, but I think this story is going to wind up being that the tape is going to wind up getting released. At the very least, the family is going to be shown, and they're going to have to decide whether they want to pursue it or not. Jeff?
I think I think there needs to be a third party involved. I don't trust Aaliyah. I just don't. I never have. Ever since it was formed to make this call. Well, you need a judge or you need somebody because they're just going to call everything. They're just going to look for a reason not to release this. So what's the point of even having the body camera? Why are we paying for it as taxpayers if we can't see this footage? We're never going to get the transparency or sort of that idea that when it was sold to us that we need to mandate it.
What? So maybe you guys are quoting part of the story that I haven't seen. Are they saying they refuse to release it? It will not ever be released? What are they saying? I mean,
they're just hanging on to it, and they haven't released it yet. They're saying the investigation is ongoing, and we're not going to release it.
Go ahead.
But they also said at the beginning we're going to show them, and then they didn't. They turned it over to Aaliyah.
But they're dealing with more than just the crime itself. They're also dealing with the Policemen's Benevolence Association, which is like their union. They're dealing with the civil service laws. They're dealing with the law enforcement officer himself having rights.
I mean, that's fine.
It's to be released.
But let me say this: it took them years. Down here, there was a similar case where Laniap wanted to see the body camera footage for something the sheriff's department in Baldwin County did, and they had to go to court over it, and they just weren't going to release it. I mean, they just too arbitrarily are going to tell you, no, we're not going to release that, and they just sit on it.
I think they're going to release it. I think they're going to have to. They just haven't yet.
I don't mean to eat up a bunch of time here, but
well,
my point. But yeah, I know. But look at the Steve Perkins case. Okay, they let that narrative get so rooted in that by the time that video got released and we finally saw it, it didn't matter to the people anymore. They had already built in. Everyone had already dug it in their position. This thing just needs to come out. People need to see it. This is completely out of control at this point.
All right, next question, Jeff. What do you got?
Jeffrey Epstein, what do you think of it? I expected someone to ask this already, but nothing to see here. Time to move on.
No, I mean, I think it was the most ham-handed. And look, listen, is there nothing there? Okay, then why was there something there until there wasn't? And you made it very clear. They did a horrible job of coming out with the "there's nothing there" thing. If they're going to do it, they need to do a far better rollout and not just like release some footage that was missing a key minute. It was basically a self-inflicted wound on this thing. Is there nothing there? I don't know, but I'll tell you right now, I really believe there's something there because you don't have that many victims. You don't have the missing black book. You don't have Ghislaine Maxwell still in jail. No one's talked to her. You don't have Prince Andrew losing everything rights as a member of the royal family over nothing burgers. There's something there. I suspect that what's really happening is there's an intelligence issue that could create some serious instabilities on the world stage if you found out that a member of the royal Saudi family or something like that was on Epstein's island. There's got to be more to it than this. I cannot believe the "there's nothing there" thing story is really what they're going to go with. Jeff, Dale, what do you got?
My good friend Dan Bongino.
Okay.
Even though he said in 2020, 21, 22, 23, and 24 that there was something on this list and he was going to get it out. We were going to see it. We were going to see it. And now he's there. And for him to say there is nothing, well, there's got to be nothing then.
Well, I'll tell you what, though. Dan Bongino had the best response of anybody I've seen. I will say that. He said, "I used to get paid to have opinions. Now I get paid to deal with facts." And I thought that was a great response. That's probably the only thing they should have gone with.
Maybe, but he'd probably be going insane if he was on the radio.
Yeah, you would have. 1 minute left, Jeff. Your own question. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a possibility. There's nothing there. I'm open to that. I mean, I'm willing to give these guys a benefit of the doubt, and I don't know. We may never know. But they did. If at best it was sloppy, ham-handed, as you said. At worst, they're covering something up. Neither one of these are good. They need to get somebody out there in front of this, at least answer some questions and put this to rest.
All right, 30 seconds. Quick question: are we going to see GOP candidates stop taking money from the AEA? Jeff?
No.
Dale?
Absolutely not.
You're right. That's unfortunate, but it's true. Teachers Union still has some sway in Montgomery and it needs to stop. All right. That is it. That's the Grand Council. Another round. Listen, appreciate you both. Thank you so much. We'll have you back on next week as always. All right. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Coming up on the break, I got to remind you as we head out, DeKalb MD. DeKalb MD Healthcare Simplified is the sponsor weekly of the Grand Council. I'll tell you more about DeKalb MD right after the break. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. Know him, but then you really got to work with him as well to some degree. So he's one of the legends of the world of pro wrestling.
Yes.
What's your craziest Ric Flair story?
None that we can tell on a fine podcast like this. But what you see is what you get with Ric Flair. His real name is Richard Fleer,
right?
But I don't think he can differentiate between the two even now. I mean, it's wild, the boldness and the brashness, as you would say, that people have. I remember walking through the Atlanta airport with him once, and a guy just pops up out of nowhere and puts his cheek against his as we're walking through the concourse and holds his phone up. Like people are taking selfies with their cheek against him, like not even speaking to him like he's a human being, like it's a statue somewhere. It's just surreal. But I've seen a lot of that, and sometimes depending on the mood he's in, it's less than favorable for them. But he's always got plenty of time if you're a veteran, if you're a child, if you're a special needs individual, or if you're an attractive woman, you got a shot at having a good conversation with him. If you look like me or Butters, you probably need to keep it moving.
I did see, though, some interview with you where you said that you found one of Ric Flair's robes on an online auction or something like that.
Oh, yeah. So you saw.
And you got it.
Yes. I've had several robes through the years. I was collecting these robes before I knew Rick, but I knew they were investment vehicles. Let me explain. If you're not familiar with pro wrestling, he used to come to the ring in something that looks like Elvis Presley or Liberace would wear it.
More like Liberace.
There you go. But you remember like the jumpsuits that Elvis wore with all the sequins everywhere and the crazy designs. Well, Flair did that, and he thought it was a big part of the presentation, and that actually went back to Gorgeous George. Gorgeous George is kind of the innovator of that.
Yeah.
And even Muhammad Ali would say he borrowed from Gorgeous George's rap. It was all just about promotion. So Flair became, I guess, the second nature boy behind Buddy Rogers, and started putting that, on some sequins on a robe, and they got more ornate and more fancy. But then one day I'm just scrolling. I'm a sports collector, so I have like an old pair of Ali's trunks and Tyson trunks, and I've got Joe Montana's jersey and just lots of silly stuff like that. But I thought from a wrestling fandom standpoint, like maybe the coolest thing you could own would be a Ric Flair robe. So I'm scrolling eBay and I found one and I couldn't believe it.
And it was legit.
It's legit. I knew it was legit. So I negotiated with the guy for the course of maybe 3 months, and then I bought a robe from him. And then when he got another one, he said, "Hey, do you want to buy this one?" Well, I negotiated and got an even better deal, so I bought that one. So through the years, I've probably had 12 different ones, but there was one that always eluded me. One that was my really first impression of Rick is when he first came to the WWF in 1991. He showed up in a black robe with white feathers, and it had silver butterflies on it. And it was on the cover of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It was on the cover of the WWF magazine, and he wore it to the ring at the Royal Rumble in 1992.
Yeah.
And hardcore wrestling fans would say that's the greatest Rumble of all time. It had the most legends. The winner became the champion, and Flair became the first guy to ever win the WWF title and the NWA title. It was a big deal. It would be like if all of a sudden, Babe Ruth, wasn't with the Yankees and now he's with the Red Sox, sort of thing. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a big deal. And that robe, nobody could find for years and years and years.
Had Rick sold it? Had it been stolen?
Nobody knew.
Oh, wow.
Now, Flair had a bunch of robes stolen from locker rooms and dressing rooms and airports. All he knew, and even ex-wives. But he did say, "Hey, I don't know where it is, so it's clearly stolen because I didn't sell it." Well, it turns out the story we've heard is he forgot after a Monday Nitro in 1995 and left it hanging in the closet in Johnson City, Tennessee at a Holiday Inn. And they didn't know how to get a hold of him because in 1995, it's not like everybody had cell phones like they do now.
Right.
So somebody just kept it. Well, while they were filming Most Wanted Treasures for A&E, which is a WWE program, they found it. Well, it turns out the guy who wound up seeing the auction on eBay, he actually had a program set up to track when anything Ric Flair related was listed, because he had found some interesting things through the years that way.
So the dude had his own algorithm for searching Ric Flair stuff.
He did. Wow. And he found this robe before anybody, and he bought it dirt cheap relative to its value. But I knew the guy because this little circle of high-end wrestling collectors is pretty small. There's probably 6 major ones. There's a lot of others.
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. Covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all, I'm talking about this show. This one, it goes like from Huntsville back on over to Chattanooga. I'm talking about from Tuscaloosa back on over to Gadsden. All the way down to that loveliest little village on the plains called Auburn, straight across the border to Fort Benning, and then big old patches of North Georgia and Mississippi all thrown in just for good measure. I like saying Mississippi. By the way, that's just the radio audience. That's the radio footprint. And then there's a ton of y'all that follow the show daily on live stream at places like X and YouTube and our website, rightsidemedia.org. And then there's all of y'all that podcast the show too. Thank you so much. It means the world to us. Cannot even tell you what it means to us to have an audience like y'all, bunch of Rightside ruffians. You are much appreciated. By the way, I'm going to make an ask. If you're one of our live streamers or you're following us on social media, do us the favor of clicking like or subscribe or whatever the case may be on those platforms, because those platforms, they give us the right, believe it or not, to do more if we have more of that interactivity. Doesn't cost you anything, means the world to us though. So if you would, that would be great. Thank you so much. Got to tell you, The Grand Council every single week brought to you by one of our sponsors, DeKalb MD. DeKalb MD, Healthcare Simplified. Now, what does that mean? Well, how many times have you been to the doctor and you have to deal with all the insurance and the copays, and you have to fill out the forms and give them your card and hope that insurance will cover it, and then you got to wind up picking up the premium costs, and it's like, good Lord. Well, DeKalb MD is a direct primary care provider with a network of clinics in Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. They got 2 locations in Chattanooga, y'all. 2 in Chattanooga for our Chattanooga audience. DeKalb MD. They provide quality, individualized care for concierge rates. What does that mean? It means that you join it like a gym. Can you imagine? $75 a month, you join your doctor like a gym. You don't have to worry about insurance. $75 a month, you get same day or next day scheduling, no wait times, longer visits with your healthcare provider, after hours access. They give you a direct phone number where you can call or text your provider. They'll even mail medications to your house. I mean, for the love. DeKalb MD, they work with you, not your insurance. It's like primary care with you in mind. So I'm going to tell you how to reach them. If you want to set up an appointment or just check them out, their website, pretty easy. It's DeKalb, as in DeKalb County, DeKalb, DeKalbMD.com. That's it. Go to www.DeKalbMD.com, schedule an appointment. When you do, tell them you heard about it on Rightside Radio. I would appreciate that. I feel like I have to read a disclaimer after that, but I don't. It always gets me. Like I'm ready to do the whole lawyer disclaimer.
You can do it if you want.
I do not want to.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
You are not bound by a disclaimer on this.
Just because I felt the compulsion does not mean I'm going to yield to it. Got some text on this. Says they got to catch up on some of those. Mark from Tony, Alabama says, tell China the land costs $36 trillion. Perfect. Tom with all the kids in Huntsville says DOD and federal contract security is growing. There are a lot of things we're not allowed to do now related to foreign investment and specifically the Chinese corporations. I bet. Absolutely, I bet. As well we should. And sooner or later, they're going to figure out how much of what we've been putting into our defense systems and our energy infrastructure has been Chinese made or Chinese influenced. In fact, I remember seeing just in the last 6 months, I swear, that solar panels, think about this, solar panels made in China, which are the preponderance of solar panels. They use them for wind farms and not wind farms, solar farms and part of the whole Green New Steel. Solar panels were found to have, for reasons that could not be explained, small transponders in them that would basically allow those solar panels to be a hack spot back into the energy grid. Can you imagine?
Phil, I'm sure that's a coincidence.
Now, JP.
You're being a conspiracy theorist.
Stop it. It's like cloud seeding, man. It happens.
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, there's no telling how many ways we have given up our national security to international interests who do not have our national security in mind. They want to compromise it. So anyway, Tom with all the kids, thanks for the heads up. Dave from Capshaw, Alabama, checking in, says, like Dale Jackson, I watched President Trump speak in Iowa last week, but unlike Dale, I did not take anything the president said to mean he was suggesting amnesty for illegal aliens. There you have it.
I don't the way he said, okay, I'll say this. Trump and his administration, they kind of crowd poll things. I think Trump throws things out there to see how his base responds to it. And the way he floated it out there, he says something like, I'm not sure if the far right's going to like this. We got to support our farmers, yada, yada, yada. And then the voices like Charlie Kirk and the base got so vocal about it. I think that's what caused them to be like, we're not doing amnesty for illegal aliens. However, his response was, we're not doing amnesty, but we're going to do a targeted citizenship pathway for these. And in my head, I'm like, isn't that kind of how Reagan phrased it a little bit? I mean, I wasn't alive during, but I feel like that was kind of the selling pitch almost with the Reagan, his biggest mistake he made. I don't know. I don't know what to think about it. I don't know if it'll be amnesty, but I'm not sure if giving them a targeted pathway to citizenship is just them saying amnesty in a nice way, in a less controversial way.
Nah.
I don't know.
See, I'm with Jeff on this thing. I do not see that there was ever an intent to say, let's find a way to do some amnesty, maybe a little bit of amnesty. Maybe we can do a tad of amnesty. I don't think there was ever going to be an amnesty plan. I do believe they're going to find a way to do the worker visas, streamline that process, and give folks a chance to come over here, work, and go home. But they're going to monitor it more strictly. I think that's going to happen. But I do not believe for a second that Trump was really saying, I got some amnesty in mind. After all the things that I've said and after all the things I've done, I suddenly feel like some amnesty. I just don't, I'm not going there. Plus, now that you've seen the unequivocal response, I'd say that's off the table. Karen from Hickson, Tennessee says, Dearest Phil, my husband is in wonderment as I have given up the 5 for you. Wow. Hang on. I got an applause there. There's got to be an applause. Okay. That's wow. So after living in HK for 10 years and often spending time over the border in China, so I guess we're talking about Hong Kong and China, in the garment industry as a fitting model, I have many thoughts regarding China. I was there at the handover laughing as folks believed that it would be 50 years before they took it back. Many have already left for Singapore or Taipei or home. Enjoy all you say, Karen and Hickson. Karen, you've got an amazing perspective. I think sometime we ought to have you on the show to talk about what it means to cede over life to communist entities. So thank you for that. And by the way, thank you for giving up the 5 for us. We appreciate you more than you could possibly know. Tom from Decatur says, I'm with Dale Jackson. Dan Bongino was sure there was a cover-up on the White House cocaine, the DNC pipe bomber, and the Epstein suicide. Now he's in a position to actually prove his accusations 0 for 3. Okay, is he? I don't think they've ever said, ain't nothing on the House cocaine. I mean, that was actually the White House cocaine. They haven't come out and that one's not gone.
No.
The DNC pipe bomber, they're actually the ones who released the video of the DNC pipe bomber that had never been released before. We just don't know who he is yet, right? Am I saying that?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Epstein suicide, epic fail.
Yeah. And I feel bad for him because I think if there was any such evidence that it would have been destroyed by now. What was it? Kash Patel said he came and there was a building specifically set for hiding Epstein stuff in the FBI Hoover building. So like, I'm sure that they were put between a rock and a hard place. Of anything, if there was evidence like that, it'd be long gone by now. But I agree with you that the handling of it, don't chastise journalists for asking it. I don't think that's a good look.
Okay. But then again, he is the president. He chastises them on a regular basis.
I agree.
Shag Nasty, the atheist, checking in. Goes, link for the solar transponders? What's he asking me? He wants the link? I don't have the link.
He doesn't believe you.
I'm not the Chinese spy. Oh, you want to see the story on it? Okay, I'll find that during the break if I can, because I am a responsive radio show host, even for Shag Nasty, the atheist. All right, I'll tell you what. Take me to the break, JP. We'll take that break right now, a tad earlier than usual. We'll come back, have a little time on our hands. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Periphery,
Are you one of the 6?
I used to be. I'm not as active in it as I was. I found that I've gotten close enough now that my fandom has changed a little bit. I just view it differently and I appreciate it differently. That's not to say I still don't have a pretty damn impressive collection. I do. But I'm just saying I'm no longer actively looking for the next thing, if that makes sense. Yeah. But there's still a few things out there that, boy, if I could find that. But it's less about what else can I add to the collection and more about what are my grail pieces, if that makes sense.
Right.
Well, for years and years, I'd called out on podcasts because I would even watch along. I think in 2022, I watched, maybe it was before that, but on an anniversary date, I watched with Ric Flair that Royal Rumble back again. And I said into the microphone, hey, if anybody can find that, I'd be glad to get you a brand new Forerunner. I mean, like my DMs are open. Here's my email address. Anytime that robe came up, I threw it out there. Well, this fellow knew because we had done robe deals together that I was interested. So he reached out to me and we worked a deal out and we sort of recreated it for the TV show. That's not exactly how it happened, but it's pretty close. But either way, he got a wire, which was almost as much as I spent for my first house. And now I have the robe.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Good
but
Lord.
There's only a handful of things that I really, really wanted. And I had already achieved accidentally. My first wrestling collectible was the big gold belt. And it's the one that Ric Flair debuted on Valentine's Day, 1986. But they used it all the way through the end of WCW in 2001. So the same belt that he wore and Dusty Rhodes wore and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Sting is the same belt that like Hulk Hogan with the NWO played air guitar with on Nitro and Goldberg beat him. And the idea that I was able to find that, I thought, man, this would be like finding... Like the Super Bowl trophy, they make a new one every year. This is like the Stanley Cup of
Wait, I'm
professional
taking it back.
wrestling.
They make a new one every year.
Well, yeah. If you go to Robert Kraft's office, I'm sure he's got a bunch of those trophies.
He's still got his
sitting
trophy.
around.
Yeah.
Yes. But I'm saying this one, they didn't make a bunch of copies of. Like, that was the NWA belt. In the WWF, like, they just make like 5 or 6 a year. So there's just several of them that have this design. But this particular belt was 3 pieces of metal and 1 strip of leather, and it was used from 86 to 2001. So when I found that, I was like, this is like the coolest collectible ever. The second coolest would be if I could find Ric Flair's 1992 Royal Rumble robe. And when I did, I was like, oh, I got to put them together.
Okay, so, but now I got to chase this rabbit then real quick. 2 questions. What is the most coveted piece of your personal collection of any kind of sports? Because I heard you say you're a big sports collector in general. And what is the one thing that's still out there that, by God, you haven't found it yet, but you're gonna?
That's easy. The big gold belt's number 1.
All right.
That's not close. I've been offered 6 figures for
Is
it
it hanging on a
multiple
wall
times.
in a shadow box, or is it locked in a safe deposit box?
WWE has it right now. They just had
No kidding.
WrestleMania, and they wanted to display it. They put Lex Luger in the Hall of Fame finally, and that's a belt that he famously beat on the 100th Nitro.
You are Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
So he called, the archivist from WWE called and said, can I borrow the belt? And I said, absolutely. We've done it a dozen times before.
Yeah.
So they have it right now, so it's on loan.
Okay.
But normally, it's at my house.
So what have you not found? What is the
one I
thing?
haven't found?
What is the thing that if you could track it down?
The WrestleMania 4 or 5 or 6 Winged Eagle Championship, the world title that was worn by Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, or the Macho Man. The reason I'm specific about those 3 is they were dual plated. So it was nickel and gold. Starting at WrestleMania 6, every belt after that and through WrestleMania 14 was like all gold. But the look of that one, because that's when I really fell in love, was WrestleMania 5. The first WrestleMania I saw was on a double tape VHS at my grandfather's house. Once upon a time, we used to go to like movie gallery. Remember those days?
Man, yeah.
And so that's what my parents did. They were like, hey, this is a double tape set. This will be a heck of a babysitter for our 7-year-old annoying son. So I got to watch WrestleMania 4 and fell in love with pro wrestling. I had never seen it before. I was a G.I. Joe He-Man guy. So now to be able to see this was like, this is like a real life cartoon. I'm in. So if I could have the world title that one of those guys held when I first fell in love with wrestling, that would be it. But I've never found one person who has one or can even say they've seen it. So it's still out there somewhere, but I'll find it eventually. Time's on my side.
Can you find me the glasses that Roddy Piper wore in the movie They're Here, and that shows him where the aliens
They
are?
live.
They live. That's right.
Yes.
They live.
I might
sorry.
be able to find that. No, seriously, there is a niche collector. I know 2 people who would know where that is.
No kidding.
Yeah. The Underground Railroad of wrestling collectibles. Here I am as the Forrest Gump of that too.
All right, let me ask you a couple of quick questions about your knowledge of the wrestling industry, shall we say?
Sure.
Massive stage events. Has there ever been a time, because I like we had the thing with John Cena just had the big event, right?
Yep. WrestleMania.
It's like his. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. And I'm saying like just pulling pins on truth grenades today. So TL from Huntsville just says, never thought I would agree with Shag Nasty, but I have heard about the solar panel hidden transponders, but I've not done any research on it. I would appreciate that story source too. This actually seems like it would be easy to do, but I've wondered about the cost and effectiveness. So just so you know, I am sending you and Shag Nasty both the link to the story that I've got in front of me right now from Reuters. Reuters, May 25th of this year, rogue communication devices found in Chinese solar power inverters. And so it goes on to say that U.S. energy officials are reassessing the risks posed by Chinese-made devices that play a critical role in renewable energy infrastructure after unexplained communications equipment was found inside some of them, people with close to the matter said. These are power inverters that create the connection between solar panels, wind turbines to the electricity grid, but they've been, you're supposed to get the manual that says all the parts contained are this, except that unnamed in there was an actual communications device that could allow them to get around firewalls if they were remotely hacked in. And so the bottom line is this: Chinese supplying stuff to us that has unexplained, undocumented communications devices, including, by the way, cellular radios inside of lithium batteries that are used in cars. Why? I mean, you look at this and go, what's going on? Anyway, I sent you both the link. Shag, thank you for reminding me there's a story out there to bring to your attention, and I just did. So there's that. Got the grades real quick, and then I'll go to the phones. John from Huntsville says Dale Jackson gets a C- for his terrible performance. Wow. Jeff Poor gets a solid A for his strong performance. Phil and Ryan Cantrell both get an A double plus for their equally fantastic performances, which means today's winner with a perfect A triple plus is the magnificent JP, because unlike other radio people, he actually fixed the technical issues.
Thank you.
He says, congratulations, you are still my favorite, my number 2 favorite radio guy of all time, right behind Phil Williams, who's my number 1 favorite radio guy. I'm good with that. Thank you so much. Wow. And then TL says, thank you for the link. He says that they can do it on weather balloon. Why not on a solar panel? I agree. And then David and Bucky says, Phil, how about us adding a link to the story in tomorrow's newsletter? I bet a lot of ruffians would like to read it. That's a reasonable idea.
I'll shoot it over to the
Butterman.
To the Butterman.
Let me go to the phones, because I do believe Jeff Rowe from Indiana is on the line. Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm home.
Yes, you are.
Thank goodness.
How's your sweet wife? She's home too, though, I understand.
Yes, she is. She's lounging on the couch here and taking it easy.
Well, I hope you're spoiling her, because she deserves it.
Oh, sure. I would never do that.
Well, that's good, man. That's good news, and I'm glad everything went well. So they kept her overnight. Is that what you said?
Yeah, kept overnight and everything, and everything as far as the tests and everything came out wonderful. So
all right. Well,
thank God, and thank you all for the prayers and everything.
Absolutely. Did you get a chance to listen to the show at all today?
Most of it, yeah.
Teachers unions. What are your thoughts? Quick, unvarnished.
That's exact. Quick, unvarnished and everything. Yeah. Everybody just needs to keep in mind that a union doesn't work for the employer; they work for the employees. So therefore, the teachers union has nothing to do. They could care less about kids and everything. As long as there's kids there that's giving them money, that's all they're concerned about.
Yeah.
So, these people think, oh, the teachers union, they're for the kids. No, they're for their workers. And sadly enough, the majority of their workers are liberals, and liberals have liberal causes, and that's why they don't complain about whenever they support all these crazy Democrats and stuff.
You know what I saw time and again was that sometimes there were what I would consider to be reasonably conservative individuals who were still members of the teachers union, because the ones who aren't liberal but who join are usually joining because they've had their fear stoked. They're told you're going to get fired. They're going to run roughshod over you. You're not going to get tenure. They're going to abuse you. And so they scare them into believing they have to, you might get sued. We're your insurance. Never mind the fact that they have state insurance. I mean, they're state employees. So it was galling to watch the way they abuse their own people.
Yeah. It's like if you was living in the hood and you're a snitch. You're not going to be very welcome in the hood. I'm sorry, but you want to keep your mouth shut, and that's what they do.
I have a friend who was the principal of a blue ribbon school, which is like a really high national recognized award. She was an amazing principal, great educator, blue ribbon principal, and she would not join the AEA. And they told her she was no better than the people that show up at church picnics and don't bring a dish. And I thought, that is just awful. That's just amazing.
How would they even know anything about a church picnic? I don't think they even go.
That's fair. Hey, the other one I was going to ask you about, what do you think about the stuff about China buying up farmland in the U.S.?
Well, they're just getting around it by getting some Chinese citizen that's got that has citizenship. Hey, buy it for us, and then they just come in under the auspices of them. What would keep them from doing? You can keep a government from buying things, but you apparently can't keep an American citizen from buying things and then turning it over to Chinese. So it'd have to be something written in there where we had to get the CCP out of it altogether.
Well, I agree. I think part of what they're looking at is at least foreign corporations. Hello? I mean, did we lose him? Did we just lose him? Okay. You still there, Jeff?
Did I lose you?
I think he's lost sound again on his side. That's our phone system keeps doing that, man. Well, I'll be John Brown. All right. The bottom line is this. I don't know what's going on with our phone system, but we shall figure it out. In the meantime, just know I really do believe that we're looking
Ready
at
to connect.
more
Click
incorporation.
connect to show now. You are connected as the host.
There needs to be some
Welcome,
measure.
host.
or
You are
some
now
measure
in the
at the
host
very
room
least
and can
for
manage your
why
callers
we've
from
got
the
it.
call-in
You got him back?
studio web interface.
Oh, what is that? Why is the system talking to me right now? Whose voice was that? Grok talking to me? What?
Grok? No, not Grok.
By the way, what is Grok doing? Grok went totally
Oh my
anti-Semitic
God,
yesterday.
Grok, yeah.
That may be a story for tomorrow.
Well, Jeff, are you back yet? I think we tried to.
I'm here. If you
Oh,
can
there
hear me.
you are. I'm talking to you, and all of a sudden you were gone. I don't know what just happened.
I don't either, but it was the same thing.
Chinese land grab. That's where you were.
Chinese land grab. Basically, we can't keep an American Chinese citizen from buying it, so they can just go through them and go through a back door, basically. So we have to have some kind of stipulations put in so that they can't have anything to do with any of the ground.
Well, I think they'll try to find their workarounds. I guess the thing is we shouldn't make it easy for them. That's the thing. We shouldn't just roll over and go, "Hey, China, why don't you openly buy up land next to our military bases and scarf up all of our farmland?" I think at the very least we ought to make it difficult for that to happen.
As soon as American citizens can buy Chinese land next to their institutions, then we don't need to let them buy any of ours.
It's always what's good
that.
for the goose is not good for the gander, apparently, because China got mad and they issued a statement saying this was really wrong and they didn't appreciate being treated this way. And I look at Mexico. Mexico's got riots in the street right now because Americans are coming over the border into Mexico and they don't want them. I'm thinking, come on, y'all. Please show some congruity here. If you're going to say it's all right on our side, it's got to be all right on your side too. But we know it's not.
Exactly.
There's just no way in the world that would happen. All right, man. Well, listen, you take care of your sweet bride. And I mean, like, I'm talking about, I'm going to be checking in. You got to buy her flowers. You've got to make sure that you make her breakfast in bed. You got to do all the things, Jeff. All the things.
I can't do that when I'm in Alabama, man. I got to go back tomorrow.
All right. Well, tell her that we love her and we appreciate you. All right.
All right. We love you all and appreciate all the well wishes and prayers.
All right. See you, bud. Thank you. Jeff from Athens checked in and said, was some of this Chinese land previously native tribal land? I got no problem returning it to them. I don't know. We'll see. And then John from Huntsville, by the way, says, JP, don't let AI take over the Rightside radio studio. Fight back against the evil robots.
You will do.
There are some pixies in the machine today. I don't know what's going on, but we'll get it figured out. Meantime, just remember this. There are indeed more of us than there are of them. And oh, by the way, God is still on his throne. And yeah, y'all stay in the fight. We'll see you tomorrow.